unique in the way that we interact with our viewers.
Our audience aren't afraid to have their say. They want their voices heard now, and they've got a channel where that can happen.
I find more and more as I'm wandering around, people come up to me and they say, "We saw you on television." I say, "Oh yes, on what?" "On GB News." "Hello, are you the famous Sue?"
The whole crew hit me here now. We came to celebrate.
It's our job to be the eyes and ears of the viewers.
They are part of the GBNews family, and I'm pleased to say it's a very large family.
And if people go to the time and trouble of listening and watching, then we've got to do a good job for them.
Well, I'm here right in the epicentre of the protest.
Here we go again.
You just tuned in. Where have you been?
It is raucous here tonight.
That's what makes us the fearless champion of Britain.
Good morning, Britain. Good evening, America. Hello, wherever you're watching around the world. We are live from London. This is GB News with the stories shaping Britain and America. Tonight, in the last few moments, Iran has fired a number of missiles at Israel after an attack in Beirut. These are live pictures you're seeing now. Donald Trump has tonight told Iran, get back to the table and make a deal. We'll bring you the latest throughout the night. Also,
and I said, look, Mr. Vice President, you're wrong about this.
well, that, of course, the great intellect of our age, David Lammy, after an incredible post by JD Vance about the UK having a two-tier society in the wake of Henry Novak's death. Lammy says he told the Vice President, no, you're wrong. I'm sure he really gave that some thought. Well, a new survey says England fans aren't that patriotic at all. I'll tell you why in a moment, and a proper England fan in America for the World Cup will tell me why they're the best in the world.
I think they should keep it. I don't know why they're doing it. Do they need money?
Donald Trump couldn't quite get his hands around the Chagos deal, and apparently now he's going to buy the Chagos Islands as the UK is set to sell the archipelago. We'll talk to the man leading the charge against Sir Keir Starmer's surrender deal to ask how realistic this proposal may be. I'm Will Kingston, and this is The Late Show Live. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to The Late Show Live with me, Will Kingston, filling the very big shoes of Ben Leo this evening. Very excited to join my panel in London, GB News contributor, comedian and the People's Gammon, Paul Cox, and political commentator and a lefty with more stamps in his passport than sense, Benjamin Butterworth.
Very good.
In Washington, D.C., we have US political reporter from the Daily Mail, Victoria Churchill, and former Chief of Staff for Marco Rubio, Matt Terrell. Of course, Marco Rubio is making a very impressive run at that Republican nomination for President in 2028. Thank you for joining me tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Breaking tonight in our lead story, Israel has come under fire from Iranian missiles this evening as the situation in the Middle East hangs in the balance. The IDF said 10 ballistic missiles were fired at northern Israel earlier. All were intercepted and there were no injuries. It's the first time Iran has targeted Israel since the ceasefire in April, and it came after Israel launched an attack on Beirut earlier today. Iran's IRGC said the attacks were a warning. Israel claims it will respond forcefully. Speaking on Fox News a short time ago, Donald Trump, who has been working on a deal with Iran, told them, "You've shot your missiles, that's enough." Earlier today, he told NBC a deal was close.
Their Navy is gone, their Air Force is gone, their anti-aircraft is gone. They might have built it up a little bit over the last 4 weeks during this little ceasefire. We're very close to having a deal, and if we don't have a deal, we'll do it one way or the other. Either way, we win.
Well, before we get to our first guest to discuss this breaking news in the Middle East, let's get to let's get the thoughts of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who will have no choice but to accept whatever deal the US negotiates with Iran. That, of course, is what President Donald Trump told the Financial Times in an interview, because Trump calls the shots. He won't have any choice, Trump was quoted as saying. Well, let's go to Newsmax's Bianca Della Garza. Bianca, thank you very much for joining me this morning. What do you make of what we are seeing both in Israel as well as Donald Trump's reaction to this hostility from Iran?
It's great to be with you and your audience tonight. Well, obviously, very significant for the first time, Iran striking Israel since the ceasefire, which began in April, and it actually shows now the Iranians are willing and prepared and going to strike if Israel is not striking anywhere in Iran, but the proxy. This all, of course, started with IDF going into Beirut today. And you set it up very well. President Trump now saying in his latest comments after all this that Israel has to accept a deal that he calls the shots. But the big question is, and why this is so significant, is Iran going to get back to the table? Well, I have to tell you, there's a lot of questions now. There's sources and officials from Iran saying a deal with President Trump is no longer feasible at this stage.
We'll get to the likelihood of a deal in just a moment, but there are some people who are arguing that Israel have not brought this on themselves necessarily, but their actions in Lebanon have aggravated Iran to make this action. How do you respond to those sorts of allegations against Israel?
Well, I think President Trump is very aware of that being a significant part of the impediment potentially to a deal. I think a lot of what he was saying today in some of the quotes before the missile attacks on Israel was that this fighting had been going on for a long time. And he was hoping, of course, that a deal could get done. And whether or not, I mean, these are two nations, of course, that the President Trump has tried to have Israel and Lebanon come to the United States and have these talks. But Hezbollah is not Lebanon. I mean, we know that. Hezbollah is an Iranian proxy. So the other thread to this, too, is if President Trump did call, as he said, Benjamin Netanyahu today, he said, cut it off, do not respond. You guys have had your fun. I'm paraphrasing there, but that was what was said, earlier. And I'm going to tell him not to respond. There's also sources, Will, that Israel says sooner or later that they vow to retaliate if Hezbollah continues to attack Israel. So, a lot of this, the bigger piece, I think, is what is the end game? Where does this go from here? And what is a roadmap to calming the tensions, a deal, an opening of the strait? I mean, there's just so many questions now. You even have the former national security advisor, no fan of President Trump, this, John Bolton, saying he's worried about a nuclear proliferation as to what's going on here.
Let's tug on that thread that you mentioned a little further, which is the potential response from Israel. Trump has said that he's spoken to Netanyahu. He said don't respond. If the Israelis are to respond, and they have said that they will respond forcefully, do you think this will add to the perception in some parts of the United States that Israel is calling the shots over the United States and President Trump?
I think the information war is really muddy right now. I think there's going to be a lot of questions about the alliance, President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, which seems to be in lockstep. There's always been questions, Will, about how both of them see the ending of this war. And there were concerns that it would be very different from a United States point versus Israel. So I think we're seeing that come to pass now. And the appetite for more strikes is just not something I think President Trump wants or is willing to take. We see oil prices right now. It's Sunday night here. Oil prices trading higher. Domestically here in the United States, we have one of our major airlines, American Airlines, saying because of fuel prices, they are going to now stop 6 domestic routes. There's incredible pressure politically on President Trump to get a deal. But at that cost and at that pressure, is the deal going to be one that is going to be successful, long-term, and actually sustainable when you see Iran's willingness? And again, this is why this is so significant, willingness to continue on in its attacks.
It's been the fundamental challenge since the start of this conflict, and that is a authoritarian regime can suffer a lot more pain than a democracy with domestic political pressures at home. Bianca, thank you very much for your time.
Great to be with you as always.
Let's get the thoughts of my panel in London, Paul Cox and Benjamin Butterworth, and in Washington, D.C., Victoria Churchill and Matt Terrell. Paul, I'll start with you. What do you make of what we have seen in the Middle East in recent hours, and what does it say about where this conflict is going in the weeks ahead?
Well, every twist and turn, A, feels surprising, but B, feels unsurprising too.
Yeah.
I think
perhaps shocking, but unsurprising.
Yeah, maybe that's the right way to put it. But what I would say is that Iran are able to fire at Israel, knowing that Israel are able to protect themselves to some degree. This does feel like a bit of brinkmanship. I think that maybe there is something going on here in trying to twist Donald Trump's arm or trying to twist Netanyahu's arm. Iran aren't going to succeed, but the difference between Israel, the United States, and the way that Iran behave themselves is one is entirely ideological and the other one is entirely driven by the economy. Iran aren't worried if the Straits of Hormuz are closed, even though it impacts them economically, because ideologically and therefore religiously, they are making their point and standing by their mission. So we get this interesting standoff where you get Donald Trump saying every now and again that a deal is close. We have no idea how close or what the deal's likely to be or who he's negotiating with the deal with, and if he's negotiating with someone who can actually make the deal watertight. And on the other side of it, Iran seemed very happy to sit there and splurge the country's economic status, which is already on its knees. Let's face it, it was on its knees before the war started. They simply don't care. Yeah. So I don't know what happens next.
You're seeing live footage of the capital of Lebanon, Beirut, on screen at the moment. Benjamin, I'll come to you, and I'll come to you with two important caveats. Number one, Hezbollah has been attacking Israel for years now, so it's not as if Israel hasn't come out of the blue in order to with this current use of force against a terrorist organisation. And the second thing is that Hezbollah was not part of the ceasefire agreement between Iran and Israel brokered by the US. So this technically doesn't violate, or Israel's actions don't violate that ceasefire agreement. Well, at the same time, is there an argument to be said that this act of hostility was not helpful under ceasefire conditions and potentially has led to a resumption of hostilities between Israel and Iran?
Well, I think Donald Trump was asked about a week ago what counts as a ceasefire in this conflict, and he said, in that part of the world it's just a bit less fighting than normal, which is a pretty apt answer. I think it was well, in this part of the world it is when they are shooting in a more moderate way, which it was a wonderful line. I thought there was a little bit of Churchill in that line, actually. Yeah, I thought it was a pretty accurate reflection as well. But he also said, I think in leaked comments, and I won't quote exactly, but he thought that Netanyahu was insane with his attacks on Lebanon and that he was out of control. So it suggests, alongside those comments of Trump saying, I call the shots, I'll tell them what the deal is, that Trump's patience is wearing thin with Netanyahu as well as the IRGC. I have to say, seeing these images, this is of Beirut, but of Israel, it's almost exactly 1 year to the day, 4 days from it, when Israel launched an unplanned or unknown attack on Iran to take out its nuclear capabilities. I was in Tel Aviv at the time at a Shabbat dinner, and we had to run down into the basement as Iran started to fire back. So, these attacks on Israel come a year after Israel tried to take out its nuclear capabilities with the 12-day war. Clearly, that hasn't been as effective as it should have been or as they claimed. And I think you hit the nail on the head actually in your intro when you said an authoritarian regime is willing to take a lot more pain and disruption than any democracy does. And I can't help but think that the US and Donald Trump in particular have really underestimated the nature of the group that it's dealing with, the IRGC. They do not care about the disruption, about the death, about the bloodshed, and they will carry on because they have got the US over a barrel in the Strait of Hormuz, and that's a pretty uncomfortable position.
Yeah, let's go to Matt in DC, former Chief of Staff for Marco Rubio, of course. Matt, let's focus on that point that Benjamin has just made, which is the fundamental power imbalance between the two combatants in this conflict, particularly the fact that I would imagine no matter the suffering of the Iranian people, their regime will carry on because if they don't, it is their heads quite literally on the chopping block. How does President Trump overcome that obvious pressure problem, given that there are domestic political pressures on him which are growing by the day?
Well, look, I don't think President Trump's concerned about the quote-unquote domestic political pressure. Frankly, I don't think he's concerned about the midterm elections. He's concerned about winning this conflict. And look, I think President Trump's strategy is right, keeping that economic pressure on Iran. And look, the truth is, the more economic pressure put on Iran, the more likelihood you're going to have the people of Iran rise up. Right now, you're seeing roughly 70% inflation in Iran. So the economics here do matter. And Iran, I think, is wrong here. They believe that they can outweigh President Trump, get closer to the midterm elections. This would be a failed strategy for what's left of the regime in Iran. And look, I think what's important to note is just how many missiles were fired from Iran to Israel over just the past few hours. I saw one report saying it's about 4 or so missiles, another saying maybe it was 10, but we're not talking about 40 or 100 missiles here. And I think the question is this just a lack of missiles that Iran has left in their arsenal, or is this them just doing a ceremonial launch of a few missiles here to show they're doing something to push back on Israel? Look, the truth is this: Iran right now is on the defense. President Trump is on the offense. President Trump is in the driver's seat, not the Prime Minister of Israel, not any of what's left of the leadership in Iran. It's President Trump in the driver's seat right now. The midterm elections for him, I can tell you right now, do not matter. What matters is winning this conflict, and I think he's going to be on course of doing it.
Well, Matt, I want to go back to what you said at the start of that answer, which is what you will read in the textbooks, that if you put enough pressure on a civilian population through economic pressure, there is the theory that they will rise up and then overthrow their government. And that is indeed the hope. We have not seen that yet. What gives you the confidence that that may be the case going forward?
Because I think when police and military aren't getting paid, when you have a situation where people are not getting water, getting food, right now you're at 70% inflation, roughly speaking. Increase even further, I think there's a greater likelihood the people of Iran will rise up. But that can't be the only part of the strategy. To your point, there is the other element of this, and that truly is, at the end of the day, President Trump not, I think, wanting to see bloodshed. I think he wants to truly get a deal here. Frankly, he's the only person right now between the United States and Iran who's actually negotiating in good faith. It's the United States government, President Trump's administration, and President Trump himself who's been negotiating in good faith since day one. The real challenge here is that Iran's not negotiating in good faith. President Trump's made it very clear what he needs to see happen in order to end this conflict. First and foremost, no nuclear weapons. That's the biggest part of this. Iran has failed to negotiate in good faith. That's the real challenge here.
Yeah, Victoria, I'll go to you, and I want to bring up photos that I was studying before we went on air. These are of protests in Tehran as missiles were being launched from Iran into Israel. And there is an interesting aspect to these photos, and I wonder if anyone can pick it up, and that is there is huge amounts of women at the front of these protests. Now, call me a cynic, I've never seen groups of women at the front of a protest, or indeed in large groups in a fundamentalist Islamic country, which suggests to me that something is up here and that there is more than just a little bit of propaganda behind these photos to suggest that there is support for the Iranian regime. I don't have evidence for that, but I would suggest it is curious. How do you think and it's hard to know, but do you think that this represents legitimate support for the Iranian regime or potentially propagandist information?
Well, I think you hit the nail right on the head here. Iran is a known propagandist, and I think that this is just a continuation of that. We also see that these pictures that these women are holding up are actually of the Ayatollah Khomeini, not of the son, who, of course, at least as far as I'm aware, has not been seen publicly anywhere. Now, if you ask people why they think that is, it's because they're trying to keep his location under wraps. But people are critical of individuals like, Trump. If he doesn't come out for more than 24 hours, the conspiracy theorists start rattling off why he hasn't been seen. This guy in Iran, he hasn't been seen since the conflict started. Of course, the reports are that he's injured. But, if he's the one calling the shots at the end of the day, that might actually instill some sort of faith in the people of Iran in their leadership. And so, you know, I am really interested to see who is actually calling the shots. And this was actually something that Marco Rubio himself alluded to. He testified on Capitol Hill this past week, and he said, you know, kind of when he was being criticized by some of the Democrats about how long this process was taking, he actually went out and he detailed, you know, that within Iran, a lot of the leadership still doesn't trust itself. And so I think that that's interesting to point out, is that, you know, I think as far as that we know as the West, and as far as our intelligence services and our government leaders are conveying to the majority of the U.S. public, there's a lot of mistrust within Iran, not only with the regime, but also within the regime as well.
This is a really important point to make, and it can be easily forgotten that in the opening days of this war, the United States and Israel took out the top leadership layers within Iran, potentially in a way that was unprecedented in modern warfare. Not just the top leadership layer, but the leadership layers below that and below that. And I think, you know, if you do that in anywhere from a company to a football team to a country, that's going to lead to instability and chaos. And I imagine that is still the case at the moment. We're going to leave Iran there, but this is an ongoing situation and we will be keeping an eye on it as the evening progresses. Still ahead on The Late Show Live, though.
And I said, look, Mr. Vice President, you're wrong about this.
About the UK having a two-tier society in the wake of Henry Novak's death. David Lammy says he told the Vice President, no, you're wrong. I'm sure he gave that some mastermind-esque thought. This is The Late Show Live, only on the People's Channel, GB News.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun. No, he didn't say that, though. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
From court mornings
to warm family brunches,
from football to tennis, in the car,
in the kitchen.
GB News Breakfast is there.
With the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
We're here again.
To start your day just right. GB News Breakfast.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Some people enjoy lazy Sunday mornings, but not me.
What's the truth of the matter?
So that's a very live question. Would you support him if he waters down these plans?
Before the spin sets in, I'll be getting to the truth.
This is personal.
No soft questions, no easy answers.
It's one thing if the state has rules in this country. It's another thing whether the police and others actually police them.
Setting the agenda and holding those in power to account.
You can't really blame her if the system is set up this way.
You will not want to miss it, trust me. The Camilla Tominey Show, Sundays from 9:30, only on GB News.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I ever got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live with me, Will Kingston. Don't forget to get your comments into gbnews.com/your say. Already some great insights coming through. Mr. Harper says, well spotted, Will, with respect to those images of protests in Iran. Looks like AI to me. The hands can be a giveaway. I think that is a very good insight, and that's something that my panellist Paul Cox said to me in the break as well. It would be interesting if we can analyse those photos a bit further. So moving on to our main news story this evening. JD Vance has been in discussions with David Lammy. David Lammy gave a call to the Vice President this weekend, asking him about the comments he made about the death of Henry Novak. The Vice President blamed Henry's death on two-tier policing and what he called a mass invasion of migrants. The Deputy Prime Minister hit back.
Disagree with him. This has got nothing to do with mass migration. This young man was a Brit. Let's be clear about that. And I said, look, Mr. Vice President, you're wrong about this. And it's also the case that actually murder is coming down in the United Kingdom. So we had an agreeable conversation, but we disagree.
Lammy also rejected the idea that Britain has two-tier policing. But in breaking news tonight, the founder of Iceland, Sir Malcolm Walker, has intervened to say that two-tier policing does indeed exist, and not just on the streets. He gave the example of an Asian shop worker who was handcuffed by police after a black customer he'd confronted for tampering with stock accused him of racism. But despite the events of this week, the police watchdog Abimbola Johnson has claimed tonight that forces still aren't doing enough to combat institutional racism. With me now is Harry Miller, former police officer and founder of Fair Cop. Harry, thank you for your time. I'll start with those comments from Abimbola Johnson, who said that, and I believe the term that was used was anti-racism, which has a very particular connotation. It goes further than equality to actually creating artificial imbalances in order to try and make up for past injustices. Do you agree that at the moment they're still not doing enough to combat institutional racism, and this is an institutional racism against white people, in police forces in the United Kingdom?
Yeah, there absolutely is institutional racism against white people. The problem is the police haven't got over the headache of the Macpherson report. If you remember, when Stephen Lawrence was killed in the 1990s, not by a police officer, but the response was woeful from the police. And Macpherson eventually got around to writing a report, and he talks about institutional racism within the Met. And the problem there was that he said that the police had a tendency to view all black people as perpetrators and not to see them as victims. Well, we've gone full circle now. We've gone absolutely full circle. We've reversed that finding in its entirety. It's now the case that the police cannot possibly see a white person as a victim when a black person or a non-white person accuses them of racism. All policing principles just go out of the window at that point, because our police have been indoctrinated that there is nothing more evil than racism, that there is no concern that the police should address greater than racism. And in the tragic case of Henry Novak, the police were determined to get to the bottom of the racism allegation before they addressed the real problem, which was a young white man was literally dying at their feet. But they've become so indoctrinated to this nonsense around race that they weren't able to see that. So David Lammy is absolutely wrong, and JD Vance is absolutely right. And the ignorance of David Lammy and Keir Starmer is quite extraordinary. It's spectacular and it's deliberate. It's quite incredible, isn't it? It's quite incredible. When a black guy from Minnesota dies, they have no problem whatsoever in expressing their rage and outrage and taking the knee and doing all that sort of stuff. When it's a white guy from Southampton, then it's a case of nothing to see here. And then this argument that, well, actually, the statistics around murder are coming down. That is a straw man if I ever heard one, because the issue here is about the death of Henry Novak and the police's involvement in that death. and the racism against white people, which is endemic throughout the police force at the moment. That is the real issue.
There are so many things that I find deeply sad about this saga, but one of them is speaking to ex-cops in the last few days, and I've spoken to several, and there are few people in society who are more angry and more hurt about what they saw when they watched that footage than many ex-cops, particularly those who have been out of the game for 10, 15, 20 years, because they say this just would not have happened in my day. How does this impact you on a personal level when you saw that footage and when you hear how the police force has changed since the McPherson report?
Well, it's absolutely stunning because no police officer joins the police because they want to behave like that. Those officers have joined the police. They've been subject to the radical militant views of their DEI departments, and they have had all their humanity and all of their common sense deliberately squeezed out of them, so that the only concern that they have is tackling race. That's what's happened. I was at a stall just a couple of years ago in Leicestershire, where it was a community engagement stall, and the police were there, and they had a poster. The police had a poster that said this. It said, "Make racists afraid again." What? It's not the job of the police to make anybody who is not unless you're involved in criminality, it's not the job of the police to be making people afraid again, is it? That's not the job of the police. But when it comes to racism, the police are entirely blind. They see it as being on a par with paedophilia and mass murder. And all it takes is somebody to point a finger and say, "Oh, look, there's a racist." And then all of the concerns go out of the window with absolutely tragic and devastating consequences. Most police officers who still have retained an ounce of common sense and compassion and humanity are absolutely cringing at what has gone on, because all of them, like all ex-coppers, we could see that this was going to happen. Some of us, we at Fair Cop, have been saying for many, many years now that this was going to happen. We imagined that somebody would commit suicide due to police interference for a non-crime hate incident or something like that. I hadn't imagined anything quite as brutal and terrifying as this, where the police response to somebody who says, "I can't breathe and I've been stabbed," is to say, "I don't think you have, mate," slap them in handcuffs and start dragging them away to the prison cell. It is a level of inhumanity that is very hard to stomach, and it needs to stop, and stop immediately. There needs to be wholesale changes, not in 5 years' time after some sort of inquiries happen, but tomorrow, Monday. That's when it needs to start changing.
Well, I'm deeply concerned that the full inquiry will not kick off until September 2027. I think that is an outrage, and we are going to be putting pressure on to ensure that there is accountability well before then. Harry, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Let's go to my panel in London now. Paul, I'll start with you. And I think it's important to be very clear here that there are two separate but related issues going on. There is the issue of mass migration and multiculturalism and the role that that may have played in the death of Henry Novak. And then there is the issue of two-tier policing after he was attacked, when the police arrived at the scene, and the institutionalised social justice ideology that may have played a role in that police response. These are separate. Let's just look at that first piece first, mass migration and multiculturalism, because that is what JD Vance was getting at, and that I think is the more controversial of the two elements. I would argue personally that mass migration and multiculturalism does play a role here. Many second and third generation migrants who are British still are not integrated in the way that many people would hope. In fact, many of them become more fundamentalist or more attached to their ethnic identities, even more so than their parents, particularly the case in Muslim communities, but across many religious groups. I would also add, in addition to that, that we do obviously have policies or laws which are dictated by multiculturalism, like, for example, one person being able to carry a knife and another person not. I personally think that multicultural and mass migration is a story that needs to be told, and JD Vance was right to say that.
Yeah, me too. I've been saying this since this became the huge story that it is, both nationally and internationally now. If you keep looking at the Harry Novak incident in isolation, you can avoid any of the ills that have got us to this point if you wish to do so. This is, of course, a part of the much wider picture. First thing I want to say is anti-racism laws and policies excluded white people. Undeniable. And as such, it was a progressively racist idea, and it was an ideology. Also, it was about retribution in many cases rather than justice. And even more to that, I would also like to add, my theory has always been that racism doesn't really exist outside of the liberal progressive paradigm. It's something that only exists because of the way they've constructed modern politics. Benjamin's waiting.
What are you on about?
Well, let me tell you something.
Racism doesn't exist outside a liberal elite.
Yeah, I'll get to Benjamin on this.
What does that mean?
Yeah, right of reply, OK.
No, just explain what you just said.
Because we have discriminated for eons in human history against people. We have, because, by the way, the left have rewritten what racism is for a start, so that would justify my point immediately, because just talking about someone's race now is deemed racist. And we know that because of the things I said about anti-racism laws and policies excluding white people, that is active retribution against the white person in order to score points on behalf of a perceived victim of the past.
Well, I mean, you will struggle to find a single non-white person in this country who will tell you that they've never experienced racism, and that includes people...
And you will now struggle to find a single white person in this country who can say the same.
Well, you know, your white victimhood clearly knows no
This
bounds.
is not about me.
No. The idea that you just said there's no racism in Britain is...
No, that's not what I said, Benjamin.
That's exactly what you said. You said there's no racism outside the liberal elites.
No,
what does that mean?
Again, I didn't say...
That's literally what you said.
No, I didn't.
That's exactly
I've written it down because I feared it might induce a panic attack. Racism doesn't exist outside the liberal progressive paradigm. Your view of the world is one that requires racism to exist. It doesn't... Racism is just a discrimination between...
In the minds of people like you, white people can never do anything wrong. They're always the victim, and it's just everyone else disrupting your nice little world. The fact is that everyone from Kemi Badenoch through to David Lammy and Diane Abbott will tell you about racism they've experienced in their life. Of course it exists, and of course it's wrong, and of course you should be proactive to tackle it. There's a reason why black people who manage to succeed and buy a nice car are significantly more likely to be stopped by police than you or I in the same Mercedes.
What year are you living in?
When the George Floyd incident happened...
Floyd?
There were lots... No, I'm going to speak now. You've had your time. There were lots of incidents where people came out and talked about the kind of racism they faced. I remember a barrister, so clearly a very successful person, who talked about how he was perpetually stopped in his Mercedes because he's a black man in an expensive car. That is the kind of situation that is clearly racist. Only 2 years ago, in 2023, 2.5 years ago, the Casey report found institutional racism against ethnic minorities. Now, that is not to say that there wasn't a bias in what happened here. I think it's totally plausible that part of the police officers' decision-making was to see a working-class white boy who they assumed to be drunk, we suspect.
Wasn't working class.
Well, but
was not drunk.
But no, he wasn't. If you listened, I just said that's what they suspected, and they made assumptions. That is a bias that they were carrying out, and that's wrong. But this argument that you're trying to make this tragic death of this boy fit a narrative that you had before this happened, to take advantage of his death, to say that there isn't racism against black and brown people, is totally wrong, totally inconstructive, and exactly what the Novak family said you shouldn't do with their boy's death.
OK, my 2 cents before we go to break. I think there is racism in society because there's racism in literally every society. There has been since the start of time. But the racism in society, the supply of racism, does not match the demand for racism in society. And that demand, a lot of the time, is from a woke industrial complex that makes a lot of money out of perpetuating racism in society. Still ahead on The Late Show Live. A new survey says England fans aren't that patriotic after all. I'll tell you why in a moment. And a proper England fan in America for the World Cup will tell me why English fans are the best in the world. This is The Late Show Live, only on GB News.
Some people enjoy lazy Sunday mornings, but not me.
What's the truth of the matter? So that's a very live question. Would you support him if he waters down these plans?
Before the spin sets in, I'll be getting to the truth.
This is personal.
No soft questions, no easy answers.
It's one thing if the state has rules in this country. It's another thing whether the police and others actually police them.
Setting the agenda and holding those in power to account.
You can't really blame her if the system is set up this way. You will not want to miss it, trust me.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sundays from 9:30, only on GB News.
Breaking news, live updates, stories that matter.
From the heart of the GB newsroom to every corner of Britain, with our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
GB News bulletins are there to deliver the latest news that matters to you. Bulletins on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it? Because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world. Am I allowed to talk now? No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, this Trump made a good start. No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I ever got up? About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I've been in Westminster for a long time, but I know that though power may be here, its effect on people's lives is across the whole of the country. We may be where rules are made, but it's where they're implemented that matters. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for forthright and frank discussion on where Britain has come from, where it's going, and where it will end up. That's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Vox Populi, Vox Dei.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live with me, Will Kingston. Well, a new survey has just dropped and it says England fans aren't as patriotic as some of their rivals. Despite England being among the favourites for the event, only a fifth of fans who've placed bets across the country are backing them to win. Scotland fans are even less positive, with only 9% putting money on their team, and people in Portugal are feeling the most optimistic. 57% of fans think that they can lift the cup. So, is England suffering from a patriotism problem? With me now, England fan Andy Milne, who is in Florida following the World Cup. Andy, thanks for joining me. I will never forget, I was at the Ashes on the day where Ben Stokes hit that miracle century in order to win that Test match against Australia, and the what I copped after he hit the winning runs, I would never say that English fans are not passionate, quite the contrary. What do you make of betting companies coming out and saying that English fans aren't really that supportive of their team?
No, England fans are the best. I think you'll find that England fans are cautious with their money because maybe they've been reckless with their emotions for the last 60 years. We've had so many near misses. You know, we Italia 90, Euro 96. Under Gareth Southgate, we've come close so many times. The last two Euros and the last World Cup, we were very close. So yes, it does hurt when you invest all of your emotions, let alone investing your money in it.
Yeah, and there is a bit of a pattern, and I'm very delicate as an Australian speaking about this, but I would note that the pattern is initial optimism and enthusiasm and joy, and then we'll start hearing "It's Coming Home" blaring in every pub across the country, and I get excited about it. Yeah. And then the quarterfinal or the semi-final will come along, and it's see you later. Is this just a emotional self-defence mechanism, perhaps, from some English fans?
Look, the costs out here are huge, and I think that you'll find that a lot of the fans, I mean, there were thousands there yesterday who've saved really hard to make their way over to America. They've invested their money on flights and hotels and tickets, and that's where the money's gone. The Portuguese, okay, come on, 50-60% of the country are backing their own nation. They're not bad, but they're not that good.
Okay, and finally, Andy, will England win the World Cup?
I really hope so. Yeah, I'm keeping everything crossed, and we're going to be getting behind the team. First, we've got the friendly match in Orlando, and then we start for real up in Dallas, and it's getting really exciting over here.
It's coming home. Thank you, Andy. We'll be keeping contact with you as the tournament progresses. Still ahead on The Late Show Live. We'll be looking at the newspaper front pages. The Times is saying that Starmer has a ban on harmful social media for children in the works. This is The Late Show Live, only on the People's Channel, GB News.
Breaking news, live updates, stories that matter.
From the heart of the GB newsroom to every corner of Britain, with our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
GB News bulletins are there to deliver the latest news that matters to you. Bulletins on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From court mornings
to warm family brunches.
From football to tennis in the car.
In the kitchen.
GB News Breakfast is there. With the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
We're here again.
To start your day just right. GB News Breakfast.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact is Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up? About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it?
Because
the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes and Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live with me, Will Kingston. Let's delve into some of the main stories on the front of tomorrow's newspapers. We'll start with The Times, where they are reporting that Starmer's ban on harmful social media for children. This is mirroring the model in Australia, who have banned social media for under 16s. It is being reported that Keir Starmer is going to announce a similar ban in the United Kingdom in the coming days. Benjamin, I'll start with you. And the interesting thing about this story is that it actually cuts across ideological and party lines. I've spoken to a lot of Conservatives who are supportive of this ban. I've spoken to a few Progressives who are against this ban. So it's not actually quite a neat way of analysing it. Where do you stand on it?
Well, you're right. I think Kemi Badenoch, the Tory party leader, put a proposal forward in Parliament to ban it some months ago, which wasn't accepted. So Keir Starmer's clearly changed his mind. I actually think I was unsure at first, because, you know, people can get round these bans. Is it a breach of freedom? But I have to say, I've come to the conclusion that it's absolutely the right thing to do. I mean, the Danish Prime Minister said a couple of days ago she would rather her children took up smoking than used social media. And I think that is the right comparison. I think social media is designed to be addictive. The idea that Starmer is apparently putting forward is to ban things like infinite scrolling and some of the algorithm design that makes it addictive. And what we have is a situation where kids can be exposed to all sorts of content. Some of it distorts their idea of self-image. Some of them indoctrinates them into ideas of suicide and poor mental health. Others of it is online bullying. And it's also, we know now, increasingly very bad for development of young minds. And there is increasing evidence that it's harming their cognitive abilities and abilities to learn properly. And I think that is such a serious problem that we will reflect on letting kids have social media like we would look at our grandparents having a cigarette at 12 or 13.
I don't disagree with anything, well, with much of what you've just said, but my problem, and it would be something I would say to that Danish Prime Minister, is if you would rather have your kids smoke than take up social media, why don't you then make a concerted effort to stop your kids on social media? And this is my problem, Paul, and that is it feels like increasingly the government is taking on the responsibility of parenting and taking that responsibility away from parents. And you know what happens when we do that? It means parents feel more comfortable not doing the bread and butter jobs that they should be doing, which is why so many kids now are rocking up to school without breakfast because, oh, well, the government will have to give us, you know, free breakfast at schools. Is this just a way for the government to put more control into the lives of people and take accountability away from parents?
Well, first of all, unlike the Danish Prime Minister, I'm glad my daughter used social media rather than took up smoking. That's quite a ridiculous statement. Something I might say, actually, which is not becoming of a political leader, I would say. But, look, I think at the essence of this is something that does need controlling. We are finding out for the first time in our human history, as far as we're aware, how technology can affect young people, particularly when it comes to the internet and social media. I said previous to this that it's this generation that will finally crack the nut on this. Our generation, well, I'm a bit older than you both, but the generations that exist that didn't have social media growing up and then had to learn to adapt to it. We're
just
not
quickly,
going to...
Can I just interrupt you? I'm sorry to interrupt, but I heard you say that line on the Late Edition. When you say finally crack the nut on this, what do you mean?
Well, because I think that right now we've got a bunch of so-called grown-ups that are trying to fix this problem based upon a convention, and they don't fully understand the use of social media. And much like where you've got a poacher turned gamekeeper, these children that are growing up now using social media will be able to inform people much later on how to avoid the pitfalls. Just taking a hammer to this nut and saying we must ban, which, and I agree, by the way, I've got a 16, 17-year-old daughter who grew up within this environment, and you do the best as you possibly can as a parent. You're absolutely right. It sits with the parents, not with government, and you do your best as a parent to try and teach them the perils and put restrictions in place, boundaries in place. But ultimately, right now, I don't see anybody within the Labour cabinet that's going to be able to fix this because they just don't have the experience to do so.
Can I just ask, given that you have a relevant age child or children, how difficult was it when they're at school and everyone's on social media and the peer pressure? On an actual practical level, how difficult was it to tell your kid, or did you try to tell your kid, you can't use Facebook or Twitter or TikTok or whatever they use?
So it wasn't necessarily, again, it's not about saying yes or no. It's not a binary thing. I'm all about option fluidity when it comes to this matter.
Hopefully not gender fluidity.
No, definitely not. I try to avoid gender fluids at all time. I never said to her, absolutely cannot use that. In the same way as I would never say to her, you absolutely cannot drink at 17. The point is you instill a structure that gives them the boundaries and you make them aware of the risks and you say to them, this is what can happen. You are best to talk to us about it, and I think that's part and parcel of parenting.
Benjamin, a quick question before we go to break, and that is, what will happen when you have the tech-savvy kids, who are the majority, who will get VPNs or find other ways to get around this, and you'll have the odd children who won't do that for whatever reason and will end up being even more isolated and even more unpopular as a result of this? It feels to me that's a very real risk.
I mean, I think things like preventing continuous scrolling and addictive algorithms probably should be implemented for everybody, and so then a VPN wouldn't just be a way for a teenager to get around it. I do think, though, that if you actually just ask yourself as an adult the question, do you think spending time on social media makes you happier and improves your mental health? I think we'd all say, although we still use it and it has benefits, the answer to that is no. So just imagine how significantly worse that is on a developing mind and a mind that, you know, a young person that doesn't yet know their role in society. I think it's going to become an obvious one to ban it.
Well, there is more coming up in the next hour. Stay with us, ladies and gentlemen. We will be bringing you the latest on the rising tensions in the Middle East after Iran fired missiles at Israel in the recent hours. But first, it's your weather.
Today, clouds overhead. Total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's been a pretty wet start to summer and it does look like that is going to continue into the new week. However, there is some sunnier spells in the forecast for the next couple of days. But for this morning and for the rest of the afternoon, we do have some heavy showers across central England, which are slowly moving their way eastwards. Now, some of these are going to be heavy. We could see up to 20 millimetres falling within a couple of hours, possibly even the odd rumble of thunder. But for the rest of the UK, we do see the return of sunnier spells. There is a few showers across Northern Ireland, but temperatures are on the cooler side, especially for the time of year. Highs of around 15 or 16 degrees, maybe an 18 or 19 in the very far southeast. But through this evening, some of these showers may linger through the evening across East Anglia and Kent, but elsewhere we will get some nice evening sunshine for much of England and northern Wales. We do have some showers which can be heavy across Northern Ireland as well, and they are moving in towards western Scotland. Further towards the east, we will see some evening sunshine here too. 1 or 2 showers dotted around, but they are moving their way off towards the North Sea as well. Now, as we go through the overnight period, you'll see the swirl of cloud and rain up towards the northwest, which is bringing these showers towards the western half of the UK. Some of these could potentially be heavy, but clearer skies out towards the southeast. Here we could see temperatures dipping into those mid-single figures, so it will feel rather chilly to start Tuesday. But as the sun comes up, it will be a nice start. But as we go through the day, showers will develop for pretty much everywhere as we head through the morning and into the afternoon. Some of these are likely to be heavy, chiefly across the northern half of the UK, and we could potentially see some thundery outbreaks as well. It's still on the cool side, temperatures around the mid-teens, so it's a couple of degrees lower than the June average.
Today, clouds overhead. Total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
From cold mornings
to warm family brunches.
From football to tennis in the car.
In the kitchen.
GB News Breakfast is there with the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
We're here again to start your day just right. GB News Breakfast.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/your say. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/your say, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Some people enjoy lazy Sunday mornings, but not me.
What's the truth of the matter?
So that's a very live question.
Would you support him if he waters down these plans?
Before the spin sets in, I'll be getting to the truth.
This is personal.
No soft questions, no easy answers.
It's one thing if the state has rules in this country. It's another thing whether the police and others actually police them.
Setting the agenda and holding those in power to account.
You can't really blame her if the system is set up this way. You will not want to miss it, trust me.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sundays from 9:30, only on GB News.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country. There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor. Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world. Am I allowed to talk now? No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up? About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, Britain. Good evening, America. Hello, wherever you're watching around the world. We are live from London, England. This is GB News with the stories shaping Britain and America. Tonight on the show. Well, here we go again. Iran has fired a number of missiles at Israel as Donald Trump's deal hangs in the balance. We'll bring you the latest from the Middle East as it develops. Also tonight, Jeremy Vine says he's afraid to talk about his Christian faith at the BBC in case it's too contentious for his co-workers. We'll get the take of our panel in America where this concept is completely foreign. Zach Polanski sparked more fury in the Jewish community by calling for dual national Brits who've been called up to fight for Israel to be tracked in case the Israel Defence Forces are found to have committed war crimes. He's been accused of marginalising Jewish people even further. Well, I'm Will Kingston and this is The Late Show Live. Welcome back to The Late Show Live, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for staying with us. Joining me this evening in London is my panel, GB News contributor, comedian, the People's Gammon, Paul Cox, and political commentator, Benjamin Butterworth. And in Washington, DC, US political reporter for the Daily Mail, Victoria Churchill, and former Chief of Staff for Marco Rubio, Matt Terrell. Thank you for joining me, one and all. Let's start with what has been the breaking news this evening, and that is that Israel has come under fire from Iranian missiles as the situation in the Middle East hangs in the balance. The IDF said 10 ballistic missiles were fired at northern Israel earlier. All were intercepted, and thankfully there were no injuries. It's the first time Iran has targeted Israel since the ceasefire in April, and it came after Israel launched an attack on Beirut earlier today. Iran's IRGC said the attacks were a warning. Israel claims it will respond forcefully. Speaking on Fox News a short time ago, Donald Trump, who's been working on a deal with Iran, told them, "You've shot your missiles, that's enough." Earlier today, he told NBC a deal was close.
Their Navy is gone. Their Air Force is gone. Their anti-aircraft is gone. They might have built it up a little bit over the last 4 weeks during this little ceasefire. We're very close to having a deal, and if we don't have a deal, we'll do it one way or the other. Either way, we win.
And the Financial Times is reporting Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will have no choice but to accept whatever deal the US negotiates with Iran. US President Donald Trump he said in an interview because Trump calls the shots. He won't have any choice, Trump was quoted as saying. Well, I want to go to my panel now, and I'll start with Matt. Matt, this is obviously a concerning escalation, but at the same time, Iran have, I would say, been pretty liberal with the ceasefire over recent weeks, with drones coming towards the Strait of Hormuz, amongst several other skirmishes. Why hasn't the US called their bluff and said, if you are going to play these games, we will come back and we will strike forcefully?
Well, look, I think President Trump has a strategy, and thus far I do think it's been working. He's putting this economic pressure on Iran. Granted, the goal here is to get Iran to the negotiating table, but the truth is, as President Trump said today in the interview with Meet the Press, there's really two different paths that Iran can go down. The one course will be getting to the negotiating table, or the other course will be other options that President Trump will deploy. Maybe those are military options. But look, at the end of the day, this does come down to Iran having to negotiate in good faith here. And as I said earlier, they've got a failed strategy in my view. They're trying to wait out the clock to November. They're not going to be able to wait out President Trump. I don't think President Trump cares about the midterm elections. As I said earlier, what he cares about is winning this conflict. And part of that is trusting his strategy. He, at the end of the day, is the person in the room. He's the one who's going to be driving the strategy, driving the outcome on this. But in the end, what we've seen time again is Iran lies. We saw them do that, for example, when they launched missiles against Diego Garcia and lied about the distance in which those missiles could go. We've seen Iran lie time and again about their capabilities when it comes to nuclear capabilities. You're not dealing with people on their side of the negotiating table in Iran who are being honest and are doing this in a good faith way. That is the challenge for President Trump. But in the end, he's the person in the room. He's got a strategy that he's deploying here. We'll see what the next steps are here. He seems confident, based on what he's saying, that a deal will be struck here soon. But I think Iran's got two different paths they can go down. We'll see what President Trump does here.
Yeah, well, Victoria, on the point that Matt just made on the need for Iran to negotiate in good faith and the fact they're not doing so, that's not a surprise. Iran haven't negotiated in good faith since the fall of the Shah. They have never stuck to any agreement that they have said they would stick to. What should give us any confidence that even if Donald Trump does find a deal in the coming days or weeks, it will actually be worth the paper that it's written on?
Well, what Trump also said in his Meet the Press interview that aired today is that he is actually willing to send in U.S. troops to clear what he called the nuclear dust, basically to make sure that there is no trace of any kind of nuclear material left in Iran. And he's willing to put U.S. troops to do that, which I think, is something that raised some alarm among some people that I saw, particularly online. But I also think that it's interesting to point out that he said that he believes if he were to do it, no U.S. troops would be in harm's way. So basically, he wants to get the situation to a point where U.S. troops can actually go in there and secure kind of that nuclear promise, which of course is the key part of the deal, which Iran, at least as far as I'm aware, still hasn't agreed to.
Yeah, okay. Well, I want to come to Benjamin now. Of course, you're seeing on screen, ladies and gentlemen, live footage coming out of Israel. Thankfully, peaceful live footage at the moment, and that is in Haifa in Israel. Benjamin, as we look forward to where this conflict goes or hopefully ends, how much confidence do you have that Trump will be able to find an enduring peace?
Well, it's not looking so good so far. He said the other week that he's not going to accept a quick deal. And I thought, well, yeah, that's pretty evident given it's been going on since February. You talk about the fact that Iran's regime isn't acting in good faith. No, not at all. The only faith it acts in is extreme Islam. And that is an irrational partner to try and negotiate with because it doesn't care for any of the effects on its people, on the Strait of Hormuz, on its bank balance, on its economy. And that's why I think Donald Trump is struggling to apply the pressure that works effectively on other countries. You know, I think what we have to understand is that I totally agree with the goal of trying to take out the IRGC that runs Iran, and people often forget the context in which Israel exists. It has been taking missiles from Iran, from Yemen, from Lebanon, from Gaza, from all over the Middle East for years. This is not ultimately a response to Israel's actions. It is the entire reason that Iran and its IRGC are set up, which is to try and wipe out the Jewish state. And I think even though this is going on far too long and is far too painful, and I'm not convinced of Trump's strategy at all, we should also not forget that these are genocidal, insane, megalomaniac leaders that want to wipe out the Jewish state.
Agreed. Paul, I'll go back to Victoria's comments where she referenced some of the more grandiose rhetoric that we have heard from Donald Trump, from civilization-ending threats to all manner of art of the deal type statements. Has Donald Trump said this sort of rhetoric one time too many? Does anyone now really believe him when he puts threats of restarting this conflict back out on the table?
Well, first of all, can I just say I enjoy how right-wing Benjamin becomes when we talk about Iran. I thoroughly enjoy that. But with regards to Donald Trump, much like Ben Leo, I am getting a little bit tired of the rhetoric. It bounces around all over the place. You're on the pot, do something or get off, is what I would say. The reason that this negotiation is taking so long is because it's not really a negotiation. It's just a bit of a chit-chat between someone who might have some association with whoever the Ayatollah is in Iran. It's like me saying I'm negotiating with Barry Manilow for his next album. It's about as meaningful as that. We need either action or just get on with it. Just get on with it, because you can't keep saying it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. I always fear with Donald Trump, he's not talking to us, he's not talking to the people of Iran, he's not talking to the people of the United States, he's talking to the markets. He says whatever it takes to... Look, somebody out there do the maths here. Look at the algorithm. Depending on what day of the week it is and what Donald Trump is saying, tells you what he's going to say because it will affect the markets in some way. So Sunday night he'll say something like he's saying, don't worry about it, this isn't going to affect the deal, we're still working on the deal because the market's going to open tomorrow morning, and he knows the oil prices are going to go through the roof unless he says those things. But he's going to have to do something. We need to rip that plaster off. You've started it now, mate, you need to finish it.
Let's move on to other important news this evening, and that is this breaking news that there is a collaboration between Paul Cox and Barry Manilow. No, I'm just joking. No, we're going to go to Donald Trump, who is reportedly considering buying the Chagos Islands in another blow to Prime Minister Keir Starmer. The White House has drawn up a number of options after Starmer pledged to hand over control of the islands to Mauritius, who are allied with China and Iran. That could prove problematic, to put it lightly, for the strategically important Diego Garcia military base, which is jointly operated by the US and UK. There is no suggestion of a price tag for the Chagos. Britain's original plan was to lease back the military base, of course, to Mauritius for 99 years, and the phrasing of this sentence is important, at a cost of around £35 billion. Well, here was Donald Trump earlier this year.
Not happy with the UK either. That island that you read about, the lease, okay, he made it for whatever reason, he made a lease of the island. Somebody came and took it away from him. And it's taken 3-4 days for us to work out where we can land there. It would have been much more convenient landing there as opposed to flying many extra hours. So we are very surprised. This is not Winston Churchill that we're dealing with.
With me now is Rob Midgley, Head of Communications for Friends of British Overseas Territories. Rob, thanks for joining me. This story has just been one long farce from start to, well, not finish yet, but till now. And this is another element in that farce. Instead of a very simple resolution, which is just telling Mauritius and the, I would suggest, corrupt international courts that are enabling it to go jump in the lake, you have the UK government who are trying to appease them. And now you have, admittedly, and this is not the first preference of the US government, but one option amongst many, them saying, well, we could, after the UK gives control of the territory to Mauritius, buy it back off Mauritius. This is surely more complicated than just telling them to go jump.
Absolutely, and first and foremost, the Chagos Islands are a British overseas territory, and there's absolutely no need to cede, sell or lease it to anyone. They've been British since 1814, and we fully intend to keep it that way. I mean, what the report is looking at, and like you said, it's just one of many options, it's not even the top option, but the US is simply looking at securing a long-term future for the base, for the Western security, and they see a very weak British government. I mean, you've seen what's happened in Cyprus, Falkland Islands, Akatia Decalia, Gibraltar. There's a real weakness around overseas territories right now that the government just isn't standing up for them. So you have to expect them to start making up options on what to do. But how would it actually happen? I mean, the original deal never proceeded because Donald Trump didn't agree to change the 1966 agreement where America recognizes British sovereignty. So if they did then say, well, we're rolling that back, we'll approve it, well, a new bill by the government would have to be reintroduced into Parliament, which would put Labour MPs into a very, very strange position of knowing that the Americans want to buy it. So they'll be voting to hand the islands basically to the Americans, to Donald Trump, which is like their sworn enemy. So it'd be very interesting to see how that would play out. But right now, we're working on many different avenues where we've got a real pincer movement going on, where we've introduced a bill through the House of Lords through Lord Weir, where it's just gone past first reading, which aims to protect the Chagos Islands in perpetuity and allow Chagosians to have a referendum. We're also working in tandem with our American allies. We're working with Senator Kennedy in getting a bill through, which we're expecting is making progress very, very soon, which makes sure that the Americans, the Senate, will have a say on any changes in the future to do with Diego Garcia. So that will also cement it. But of course, the long-term solution to all of this, which we've already started on, is making sure Chagosians can be resettled onto the outer islands, because once they're resettled onto the outer islands, that means they're recognised through self-determination, which means the UN can never come after us, and it solidifies sovereignty in perpetuity, if it's not already.
The increasing global uncertainty that we now see, I think, puts this whole issue into a more sharp focus. We can't just keep treating this as some undergraduate student politics, guilt for colonialism project. If you do give these islands away to a country that is allied to China, that has very real consequences. It would make it easier for them to spy on the United Kingdom. It would also make it harder for the United States to launch direct attacks on Iran. So Diego Garcia would enable US fighter jets to go directly from Diego Garcia to Iran in a way which they can't at the moment. Surely these geopolitical realities are something that need to be taken into consideration, because the US now seems to get it, but the UK government doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, this whole campaign, we have come into information on all sorts of interests to do with Chagos Islands. Chagos Islands is one of the biggest economic exclusion zones in the world. It is completely untapped in terms of minerals, fishing, oil, you name it, everything is there. So there's a lot of interest from all over the place, a lot of corruption within the campaign itself, within the negotiations. The negotiations were tapped by China. Advanced radar systems were found on fishing vessels. But also you've got other players in this. You've got India that wants access to those seas, to the minerals in particular. They've already done a deal with Mauritius. And also you've got the EU at play here as well, because the EU have actually got French and Spanish fishing ships that have done a deal with Mauritius to access those waters, and they've been fishing illegally for a good few years now, and the UK authorities haven't done anything about it. And what's more is you do have China on the doorstep, which just want the outer islands to use as their own military base. So there's a lot going on here that we do not see that's going on.
Rob, thanks very much for your time this evening. We'll stay in touch as this story develops. I should clarify, ladies and gentlemen, there is no evidence of corruption on the part of the British government. Let's go to my panel now across London and Washington, D.C. I'm going to go first to Victoria Churchill, who has an exclusive line on this story. Victoria, what do you have for us?
Yeah, so when we at the Daily Mail reached out to the White House about these reports, they said that first off, they didn't want to see the island sold off, which I think is important. And then they also said that they realize the importance of the relationship, both of the UK and the US, when it comes to Diego Garcia. So, you know, that's just kind of the latest that we've seen. But of course, it's interesting to see how this will develop over the next few days.
Well, following on from that, Victoria, how much, so the latest was that the US effectively scuppered the deal that the UK was trying to push through Parliament as quickly as humanly possible. How much of that scuppering was a genuine concern about the threats that would come with the territory falling into Mauritius's, and I would argue by extension, China's hands, and how much of this was just Donald Trump being petulant for the UK not supporting him in the Middle East?
I mean, I think the one thing that the president has always shown is that he always wants to see America's strategic advantages at least stay the same, if not advance. You know, when we go back to, for example, the Greenland discussion of a few months ago, that was kind of his big reason, I think, outside of kind of the bombastic comments of, oh, we want to buy Greenland, underneath all of that was this concern for U.S. national security, particularly when it comes to the Arctic Circle, and not letting America's adversaries advance their control over territories where the U.S. or U.S. allies have a stake. And so, you know, of course, we saw nothing publicly really come of those Greenland negotiations, but I think if we look under the surface, what we had was kind of a recommitment of Denmark saying basically the U.S. can do whatever they want militarily when it comes to Greenland. And so I think there's quite a close parallel when you look at Diego Garcia, is that the U.S. wants to have its fingerprints in regions all across the world. And, you know, if our allies unfortunately get in the way of that, that's when we kind of advance and make these statements, courtesy of President Trump, that seem a little bit bombastic. But I think with him, you really have to be able to read between the lines and figure out what he's actually saying, is that the U.S. can't lose strategic advantages, whether that's to countries in the Arctic Circle or to countries like China in, you know, of course, where Diego Garcia would be.
Yeah. Matt, it doesn't matter what you think of the Trump administration. One thing which is undeniably true is that they are unapologetically America first. Now, this deal, which is so obviously not in the interests of the British people, must just look crazy to American conservatives.
Well, look, like President Trump or not, I don't think anyone can disagree that he calls out incompetence and does it quite well. And I think he looks at this deal of what the UK would do here and selling off this to Mauritius is incompetence. That makes zero sense to him. So I think there's that component of it. But to your point, which I think is a good one, you know, whether it's conservatives or just Americans nationwide, you know, one of the reasons why the majority of Americans voted for President Trump in 2024 is that America First approach, that America First agenda. And every decision that President Trump makes, everything he says is under that theme of America First. And so to that end, looking at this is absolutely at the core of it, in large part countering China, no question about that. But there's a strategical element of where this is located, the U.S. capabilities that are associated with that base. That's important as well. And then let's just remember, you know, when Diego Garcia was under attack, which it was not too long ago, with 2 rockets launched from Iran heading towards Diego Garcia, it was the United States that shot down one of those rockets. The other one fell into the ocean. But it's the United States stepping up to defend that island. And that's something I think President Trump recognizes. And the other part of it is I think President Trump recognized that the UK, in his view, wasn't there right away to allow the US, in his view, to use this important base, this joint base when it came to the Iranian conflict. So all of that, I think, is in his thought process here. In the end, there's no question I think he recognizes the unique relationship between the United States and the UK and the dynamics here at this. But ultimately, it's up to President Trump to decide what he does here. But it's not just about America first. It's also about incompetence. There's no question, I think, in President Trump's mind, he views this potential move as incompetent.
Yeah, Benjamin, there's something incredibly depressing that comes with having to effectively be saved by a foreign government from the incompetence, to use Matt's term, of your own government. And I know, you know, it is sometimes easier on this channel than others to provide balance. This is a very difficult one to provide balance on. This is so clearly an incompetent deal which is being struck by Keir Starmer's government?
I mean, I feel like Donald Trump's behaving a bit like Michael Jackson in the Martin Bashir documentary, just going around buying everything in sight. Every island he seems to want to pick up at an inexplicable cost. So I don't know how serious or how
At least he's
planned
getting
out.
something for that cost. Here we're giving something away at cost.
Well, I mean, you know, you say it's hard to defend. I would just sort of put back to that, why is it that successive UK and US administrations had agreed on this change? Donald Trump agreed with it until only a couple of months ago. He advocated it in his early stages in the White House, and everyone from, you know, Liz Truss through to Keir Starmer had gone and had meetings about making this move with the Chagos, making this change. So I am inclined to think there is some serious and rational reason behind it, and maybe we don't get told everything about something that is a matter of national security like these islands.
Yeah, well, my short answer would be, why did Trump support it? I think he didn't really know much about it. And why did successive governments support it?
God forbid Donald Trump talked about something he didn't understand.
Why did successive governments support it, Paul? Western self-loathing, perhaps, I think, comes to mind. But it is a fair question from Benjamin. Why have people supported it until now when it's become very, very obvious that this is a dud deal?
Well, I think very gradually over the last maybe 24 to 36 months, there are parts of the world that are waking up to the fact that we've been involved in a hybrid war for a long time. There is if we're not careful, a much bigger war on the way. And the US is not an island, it is America first. You know, this is what Greenland, Iran and Venezuela are all about. But they're only as strong as as a chain, they're only as strong as their weakest link. And, you know, the UK is an ally. If you are the US right now, you're looking around thinking, we need to shore up the UK because they've got this wet flannel of a Prime Minister who is not interested in standing up for his own country, is much more, shall we say, sexually aroused by the globalisation going on within the UK and defending itself. So it has to come in. Now it realises, because the Iran war has exposed it, that the Chagos Islands could be pivotal to any future war, and we have to protect ourselves.
In the interest of fairness, I imagine Keir Starmer would deny being either literally or figuratively a wet flannel. Still ahead on The Late Show Live, Jeremy Fine says he's afraid to talk about his Christian faith at the BBC in case it's too contentious for his co-workers. We'll get the take of our panel in America, where this concept is completely foreign. This is The Late Show Live, only on the People's Channel, GB News.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's been a pretty wet start to summer and it does look like that is going to continue into the new week. However, there is some sunnier spells in the forecast for the next couple of days. But for this morning and for the rest of the afternoon, we do have some heavy showers across central England, which are slowly moving their way eastwards. Now, some of these are going to be heavy. We could see up to 20 millimetres falling within a couple of hours, possibly even the odd rumble of thunder. But for the rest of the UK, we do see the return of sunnier spells. There is a few showers across Northern Ireland, but temperatures are on the cooler side, especially for the time of year. Highs of around 15 or 16 degrees, maybe an 18 or 19 in the very far southeast. But through this evening, some of these showers may linger through the evening across East Anglia and Kent, but elsewhere we will get some nice evening sunshine for much of England and northern Wales. We do have some showers which can be heavy across Northern Ireland as well, and they are moving in towards western Scotland. Further towards the east, we will see some evening sunshine here too. 1 or 2 showers dotted around, but they are moving their way off towards the North Sea as well. Now, as we go through the overnight period, you'll see the swirl of cloud and rain up towards the northwest, which is bringing these showers towards the western half of the UK. Some of these could potentially be heavy, but clearer skies out towards the southeast. Here we could see temperatures dipping into those mid-single figures, so it will feel rather chilly to start Tuesday. But as the sun comes up, it will be a nice start. But as we go through the day, showers will develop for pretty much everywhere as we head through the morning and into the afternoon. Some of these are likely to be heavy, chiefly across the northern half of the UK, and we could potentially see some thundery outbreaks as well. It's still on the cool side, temperatures around the mid-teens, so it's a couple of degrees lower than the June average.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boiler sponsors the weather on GB News.
Thank you for staying with us on The Late Show Live. I'm Will Kingston. Moving on to other news, Radio 2 presenter Jeremy Vine says he's worried about mentioning his Christian faith at the BBC in case it's seen as too contentious. He admitted in a new interview that he wouldn't feel comfortable talking about his belief in God and Christ at work. He's worked for the corporation for nearly 40 years, and yet still that would make him feel uncomfortable. Why should someone feel this way and that need to keep their Christianity quiet in the workplace? With me now is Lewis McClatchy-Miller, Christian writer and commentator. Lewis, there's two strands to this. There is the BBC bashing, which I'm going to enjoy momentarily. But in the meantime, what do you make of this story in terms of the broader context of people feeling uncomfortable to talk about their Christian faith in the workplace?
I think in the UK, most of us would not be surprised, actually, to hear Jeremy say that. A lot of people feel that Christians have been kind of shut out of popular discourse in Britain for some time. I think most of the representation we had on BBC programme was kind of Dot Cotton and EastEnders, the kind of doddering old, kind of foolish, sweet old lady was kind of how we were represented on television. And I think it's a great shame, of course, and it definitely has made people, especially of Jeremy's generation perhaps, feel less comfortable about being able to speak about what he thinks about faith. But what I find encouraging is as the BBC's influence has lessened on younger generations, actually we see a lot of young people looking to faith again. I think we've seen the kind of detrimental impact that we've had of decades of pure atheism kind of being the dominant force in our country. It hasn't left us healthy. You've got a mental health crisis unfolding. There's various kind of social strife, family breakdown in our country. I think we can link a lot of that to kind of lack of moral foundation and kind of Christian principle. So I think a lot of young people are no longer paying attention to what the institutions are saying about faith. And in fact, exploring this for themselves, buying the Bible. We see Bible sales soaring up to record rates this year. It's becoming a lot more popular to see young people in church again. So I think the BBC may have lost this argument, although it's unfortunate that those who are still trapped within it feel so uncomfortable to speak about their own faith.
It is interesting that you talk about a revival of Christianity amongst young people. It is a trend that I'm aware of. I personally think that it is a tad overstated, but nonetheless it is there, and the data suggests that is there. How much of this do you think comes back to a feeling that young people want to reassert their own cultural identity? They feel like there is a decline in this country. They associate the Christianity with the foundations of England, and they feel that this is a way for them to actually, I guess, stand up for their culture as much as perhaps just a newfound belief in a higher power.
Yeah, well, I think as we look through history, we can see Christianity having a profoundly positive impact in the UK. It was Christians who were very involved in the church who were the ones who sought to end slavery and, in fact, ended slavery, the slave trade worldwide. It was Christianity that came into Roman society before that and kind of stopped them throwing baby girls on rubbish heaps because, baby girls weren't valued, and instead instilled this idea that everybody has equal rights, equal dignity before the law. So it's always had a profoundly positive impact on a broken society. And I think if we trace that kind of loop as we come around again and survey the brokenness of Britain right now, it's very natural that we would look to something that hasn't been passed down now from our parents' generation or our grandparents' generation. It's in fact a kind of new thing to explore in our society again, which I think gives young people the freedom to not be judged by kind of ancestors, but instead to look freshly at what Christianity has to offer.
Yeah, let's go to the BBC. At GB News, we are unapologetically proud of the Christian foundations of this country, and there are many presenters and contributors on GB News who will openly talk about their faith. It is such a revealing insight into, I would suggest, the cultural decay at the national broadcaster that such a senior figure, someone who is incredibly important, powerful within that organisation, would feel so uncomfortable talking about this. What do you think this says about the BBC?
It's certainly very concerning. It's such a national institution. I know, at least for my parents' generation, this was considered kind of the Bible of our culture. You'd take the news as kind of gospel that comes out of the BBC. So obviously it is extremely concerning that, and I know it's not just Jeremy Vine, and I know others within the BBC who feel the same, who feel that they would be discriminated against, or there would not be a tolerant culture to Christians, although very much a tolerant culture extended to other faith groups. So I know that feeling of discrimination is there. It's present in schools, it's present in other workplaces, and this is not news. And in fact, if you look at kind of how Christians are being treated by the law right now, there's several concerning cases where people have been discriminated against for expressing Christian beliefs and not being afforded their free speech because of that. So it is a common trend to see this kind of discrimination and intolerance towards Christians. But I do think there is, the church has been around for 2,000 years. It has withstood far worse discrimination and scrutiny. And in fact, in countries where Christians are treated far worse, we see actually faith flourish in those underground churches. And so, I feel confident and hopeful that this message is one that is true, that can endure. It has been proven that it's good for society, and therefore there's something really worth looking into as a foundation. So I think we're actually only going to see the opposite, in fact, to see more and more people excited about Christianity again as a result.
Well said. Lewis, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Let's go to the panel in London. Paul, I'll start with you. The BBC have been beset by scandal in recent years. It was only last week they had to apologise to Nigel Farage. I think there are a plethora of institutional biases at the BBC. I think that the way they have approached the conflict in Israel and the Middle East has been wrong, and I think that is being reflected in their ratings for the BBC News channel. I think it comes back to this culture. It comes back to this culture where there are certain establishment beliefs that liberal progressives go along with, that there are certain other beliefs that they turn their noses up, and you have people who will effectively bully journalists into having certain opinions, of which obviously being a Christian is one which makes that list for bullying. What does this say about the BBC?
Well, it's the propagandist arm of the ultra-progressive left, the BBC. There's no two ways about it. Occasionally they pretend to be something else, but of course all propagandists do, don't they? And that's exactly why we find ourselves where we are today with the BBC. The trouble for the BBC now is there is both independent media, non-legacy media, people willing to talk about the news in a very open, frank and honest way, and the BBC cannot compete. The reason the BBC cannot compete, because if it started competing and anybody made the comparison of what they said then versus what they said previously, it would totally undermine the premise of the BBC. No news... OK, this is an experiment for anybody else. I know the GB News family, the staunch GB News family, will be watching this now, many of whom would not have watched BBC News perhaps for 2, 3, 4, 5 years maybe. Go and watch it for an hour tomorrow. Do yourself a favour. Go and watch the BBC News tomorrow and tell me how you feel. Get in touch with me at Paul Cox Comedy. Get in touch with us on Your Say, because let me tell you something. You will feel sick to the stomach because people are just being told what they want them to be told.
I probably need to bring some balance in here because I think Paul and I certainly have a particular view on the BBC. I imagine, Benjamin, you are more welcome inside the BBC studios than Paul and I would be. Do you think this characterisation of the BBC is fair?
Do you know, I'm very rarely on the BBC, so you might say that's because they've already got plenty of people who think like me. But
I probably would say that, yes.
You know, this is the same BBC that has had Songs of Praise on every Sunday, a programme set in churches around the UK, for which there is no equivalent on any other mainstream channel. But quite frankly...
So why does Jeremy feel this way?
Well, first of all, Jeremy said this on the BBC, so I'm not sure how seriously I take his complaint. But I don't want presenters like him, and he presents the most listened-to radio news programme they have on Radio 2. It gets huge listenership. I don't want him to talk about being Christian or his religious faith. I don't think that's good for our society at all. Frankly, you can believe in a Christian God or the flying spaghetti monster. All of it is a myth and a nonsense. And I don't want moral lectures like the one we just took from Lois, who talked about breakdown in society being due to a lack of moral clarity that Christianity brings. The same Christianity that allowed paedophiles to go unchecked for decades in churches around the world and institutionally protected them. The same Catholic Church that told millions, hundreds of millions of people in Africa that they shouldn't wear condoms, and then 30 million people died as a consequence of HIV/AIDS. And the same church that still lectures people about how it's wrong to be gay, which causes untold pain and misery. That is not a moral arbiter I want anybody at the BBC or otherwise to be lecturing us from.
I imagine Lewis would make a distinction between the institutional failings of the Catholic Church as an institution and Christian values and principles.
But if the Catholic Church doesn't have Christian values, then what does?
A follow-up question, though, to you before I go to the US, and that is, do you think that there would be the same discomfort raising your religious views if the person was a Muslim in the BBC?
Well, I don't know of any major Muslim presenters that talk about their Islamic faith in the way that Jeremy Vine says he'd like to talk about his Christian
Jeremy
faith.
was talking about in the office, behind the scenes. He wasn't talking on air. Do you think that there would be the same sneering attitude towards Muslims as there appears to be towards Christians?
Yeah, I think that they wouldn't want to be lectured on the same elements of Muslim faith as Christian faith. And quite frankly, to be clear, you know, all of it is completely made up, of course. You know, it's no more true than Harry Potter is true. And I have to say that one thing that does frustrate me sometimes is that people do make excuses for bigotry and discrimination if it comes from other faiths. All of it is unacceptable and none of it should be tolerated in a liberal society.
Matt, I'll go to you. I'll let the audience make their own mind up as to whether there would be a similar attitude towards Muslim adherence as there is towards Christian adherence in the BBC. There is a different relationship towards Christianity in the US. Religion is declining across the Western world, but it is declining at a slower rate in the United States compared to the United Kingdom. As an American, what do you make of this story?
Well, look, you know, I'm a Christian, I'm proud of my faith, and I appreciate GBNews letting me say that. But beyond that, here in the United States, you are seeing particularly younger Americans attending church. And, you know, look, I think faith is important. Regardless of what your faith is, you should have the right to practice it. But look, I think part of that was the fact that under President Trump, he's been, I think, working very hard to allow people to practice their own faith. Part of that, for example, was him signing an executive order to push back on anti-Christian bias, which you saw under the Biden administration here in the United States. In fact, under the Biden administration, they brought felony charges against nearly dozens, quite a few, pro-life Christians who were simply peacefully protesting. You know, they had felony charges brought against them. We've had other cases here in the United States under the Biden administration, many would argue, that have been against Christians. That is something that President Trump has been very clear about in the executive order he signed. And the bottom line here is, in America, under President Trump, it's been important to him, I think, to allow people to practice their faith. That's a good thing. And I think one thing that's been inspiring to not just Republicans or conservatives, but even many Democrats, has been Charlie Kirk. Now, many Democrats don't agree with his political stances, but what they appreciate was this was somebody who was true to his faith, who believed in his faith, and went out there and championed it. And regardless of your faith in the United States or the UK, you should have the freedom and the right to practice your faith, champion your faith as you see fit.
Well said. Victoria, Jeremy's comments, I think, reveal what is this sort of bias amongst left-wing progressives in the United Kingdom, and that is that they think Christianity is a bit gauche. It's a bit cringe. It's something to be, you know, chuckled at in Islington cocktail parties. Is there that same level of snobbery towards Christians in the progressive leftist elements of, let's say, Manhattan or San Francisco?
I think among the progressive circles, probably. But then you also have to think back, you know, our most recent president, Joe Biden, he always made kind of a pretty big public statement time and time again about the fact that he was a Catholic. Now, you know, of course, for a lot of people that are practicing Catholics, they were not quite sure how, you know, some of the policy decisions that the Biden administration made were in touch with his Catholic faith. But I think here in the U.S. we see a lot of figures in public life on both sides of the aisle being more willing to talk about their faith than I think we would see across the pond.
Well said. I'll leave this story there. I think the BBC has suffered enough punishment over the last couple of months in the ratings. I don't want to put the boot in any further. So let's go to our next story this evening, and it is one which, well, it makes my blood boil, to be perfectly honest. The leader of the Green Party, Zach Polansky, is calling for Brits who've recently served with the Israel Defence Forces to be tracked. 2,000 Israeli-British dual nationals have been called up for service since the attacks on October 7. Polanski's signed an open letter from the campaign group Declassified UK to the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, saying a database should be drawn up in case the IDF are found to have committed war crimes. The Board of Deputies said it was another attempt to demonise Israelis and promote an atmosphere of intimidation against British Jews. Well, Benjamin, I'll go to you first. What do you make of this?
Well, you know, what this is trying to draw up lists of Jews, and that is something that I'm pretty sure we know from history is not a good thing and does not lead to good places. The fact that Zach Polansky...
for the sake of Polansky would say the Jewishness is not the issue here. The issue is the fact that they are Israelis, and it would be purely as a matter of trying to connect them to potential war crimes. So it is the state that is the connection, not the cultural group or ethnicity or religion.
And yet he knows exactly what almost all of those people that have served in the IDF are going to be, and that's Jewish. If they're in this country, they're likely Israeli Britons. You know, why doesn't Zach Polansky spend more time worrying about the extreme Islamists that are in the country than people that have served their country to protect it from these people? And I would just add to that, because Paul mentioned earlier that nothing makes me sound more right-wing than the issue of Israel. I don't think there's anything right-wing about defending Israel and speaking out against racism to Jewish people, because Israel is the only liberal democracy in the Middle East. There are more Arabs in the IDF than there are Jews living in the entire Arab world. I've been to Israel many times. Last year I was there, this week last year, where I met gay people from Palestine, and the only place they had equal rights to live their lives was in Israel. And so I think it is an entirely liberal and left-wing idea to defend a country like that. And Zach Polansky, as someone on the left and as a Jewish person who's been condemned and criticised by some of his own family members, really ought to know better, because these people that he's seemingly defending are not his friends as a gay liberal.
Paul, I want you to pick up on the first part of Benjamin's answer there, which goes to the hypocrisy from Polansky, and that is that there are many hundreds, thousands of very dangerous fundamentalist Muslims in the United Kingdom. The vast majority of the terror watch list in this country is made up of fundamentalist Muslims. I haven't heard a peep from Zach Polansky about the importance of tracking those people, about the importance of cracking down on fundamentalist Islam, on the threat that they may cause, on connecting them potentially with the war crimes of Hamas. I'm happy to be proven wrong if he's on the record saying that that is a priority of his, but unless he has said that, this is stinking with hypocrisy.
Of course, yeah, and Zach Polansky is a dangerous, isolated populist ideologue, and this will become more and more extreme from Zach Polansky, more and more extreme with the, as he becomes less and less popular. He's nosediving in the polls right now in terms of his popularity, because what the local elections did was expose Zach Polansky for everything that he is: somebody who doesn't pay council tax, somebody that doesn't vote, somebody that's not actually invested in the political system in the UK, and is doing this to become famous. That's why he's doing this, and he's like the Pied Piper. You've got all these people just following him behind, and he can say anything like this. You just, as the Green Party starts to implode, because this coalition between what appears to be the extremist Islamists on one side and the LGBTQ plus people on the other, as that implodes, as it inevitably will do, because it won't stand up to scrutiny, and they'll be forced to back one another at one point as well, which is going to be incredibly interesting as we all sit back with popcorn. Zach Polansky is himself going to become more and more extreme, like all crazy people do. They don't know where reality lies anymore, so they have to come up with more zealoted nonsense.
Yeah, Matt, Paul just referred to what I think is one of the most fascinating, bizarre and troubling political phenomena of modern times, and that is the alliance between socially regressive Muslims and socially progressive woke identity politics aficionados. This is on display with the Greens here. It is evidenced in the United States. You see figures like Ilhan Omar, who you could put in that bucket. How is this relationship on the far left of politics between these seemingly disconnected groups, perhaps only connected by a loathing of Israel and a loathing of Western civilization more generally? How is that relationship playing out in the US?
Yeah, look, what you're seeing in the UK, you're seeing in the United States as well. Whether it's rhetoric from people like Mamdani in New York or his record when it comes to Palestine and Israel. Look, the bottom line here is what you've seen time again in the Democrat Party is them associate themselves with individuals who are choosing to use the Muslim faith to champion rhetoric that, in my view, is extraordinarily violent, and policy ideas which are extraordinarily violent, or at a minimum is not defending Israel, a country that was attacked on October 7th. What we're talking about here is really people who are helping a country who was under attack. They're the ones who are attacked. And regardless of how you feel about Israel's policies on Iran and other dynamics, they were attacked. The United States at one point was attacked in 9/11. The bottom line here is we need to have individuals who are going to champion those who rise to the occasion, support those who rise up and support countries who are under attack, whether it's in Israel, the UK, or the United States. But the truth is, what you've seen from particularly the Democrat Party of the United States is much of what you've been seeing in the UK. Radical ideas with radical people, in particular, radical Islamic faith being utilized to champion violent rhetoric at times, and records that, in my view, are inappropriate, unacceptable, and frankly concerning, not just in the UK, but in the United States. That's not a broad scope of everybody in the Democrat Party, but certainly far too many of them, particularly public servants, who are using rhetoric that's violent, unacceptable, and much of that associates with what we're talking about right now.
Victoria, I wanted to extend on Matt's point there and look at where the Democratic Party sits today, because there does appear to be, from afar, a battle between the sort of identity politics, progressive leftist wing, and I would suggest the diminishing sensible centre-left wing. People like Josh Shapiro, for example, are very impressive in my view. They represent what I would consider to be an old-school type Democrat. But increasingly it would appear, and tell me if I'm wrong, that the power in the Democratic Party resides more with the progressive extremists like the AOCs of this world. Where does the future of the Democratic Party lie?
Well, at least for the next couple of years, while President Trump is in the White House, and of course we have to see the results of this midterm election, it's actually going to be your more centrist Democrats that are going to hold the power. I think even if you do have Democrats take back either the House or the Senate, I think really those in the center are the ones that are going to hold the power, both on the Republican side and on the Democrat side. Now, I think when it comes to rhetoric and to getting clicks online, those progressive left ideologies, and particularly politicians, right? AOC, Mamdani up in New York, people like Ilhan Omar, they're the ones that capture clicks, but I don't know how much that actually translates to legislative power.
Benjamin, I'll go back to you, and I wanted to pull back the lens a bit beyond just this particular issue, but to the Greens or the Green Party in the United Kingdom more generally. I don't personally believe that Zach Polanski is a particularly considered politician. I think that I don't think his policy platform is particularly nuanced. I think he's a bit of a clown. But having said that, he has clearly tapped into something, and they are performing, whilst maybe having plateaued a bit in recent months, they have tapped into something and are performing well and are starting to nibble away at the advantage that Labor has on the left side of politics. Where do you see this battle on the left playing out between an incredibly progressive Green Party and a Labor Party that doesn't really know, in my opinion, what it stands for anymore?
Well, a lot of these people that have become councillors in the last couple of weeks from the local elections for the Green Party were people who were kicked out of the Labour Party. And so, that gives me some hope about the party of government, that it has some principles and boundaries. The problem is, I think, when you have a pluralist system with lots of parties picking up votes, it means that you can get enough people of that politics that will mean that something like the Green Party becomes a real force without having to care about some of the deplorable anti-Semitic anti-Semitic types that are in there, and God knows how many they've already had to suspend and investigate. I think that they are trying to ride a wave of a section of Muslim society, by no means most Muslims at all, and that's what's so frustrating about it, but a section of Muslim society that feels a grievance, and a section of left-wing, middle-class white society that sees a trend, and they are picking up on that. I think that it won't last in the medium to long term, because you are going to see these clashes, such as the deputy leader of the Green Party, Mohsin Ali, who seems incapable or refuses to answer questions about LGBT rights, because it may well be the case that there is a real fundamental difference in his views on that and the ones on Islam, which so many of the Green Party supporters have. And so for that reason, I think that the peak Polanski is probably over.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I noted with interest that when Zach Polanski was dancing with blokes in spandex up on that stage at that rally a couple of months ago, Mohsin Ali was conspicuously absent. Paul, Benjamin said that there is a connection, or it does rely on particular parts of the Muslim population that do have a certain grievance, that are coming on board potentially in a pragmatic, relationship of convenience. I also think it just comes down to ignorance. I saw some great footage after the Gorton and Denton by-election where you had a Vox Pop journalist going up to Muslims who had voted for the Green Party, and they started to read them the socially progressive parts of the policy platform on prostitution, drugs, LGBT issues, and to put it mildly, these Muslim voters were not happy about it and were obviously not aware of the full extent of what they had voted for. Do you think that ignorance is part of the mix here?
Yeah, a little bit, of course, but willfully ignorant, because it doesn't take a lot of effort. You know, I've read the policies on the Greens website. I mean, it is absolutely mental, but it is very much available. They're not hiding it from anyone. They talk about it on a regular basis in many public forums. So it's not as if this information is not accessible to them. Look, we know just last week when Sadiq Khan was supportive of the LGBTQ plus community within London, who apparently he represents, that he came under a vast amount of criticism from his own brethren in the Muslim community because they don't agree with him. They're all playing a game.
And where had he been only a week or so earlier?
He'd been to Mecca.
That's right.
Well, I don't, either that or a Millwall game, because he'd had his head shaved, so I'm not too sure. But yes, of course, but he's living a duplicity of life as well, because he cannot be all things to all Muslims. It's impossible. You are either a Muslim or you are an LGBTQ plus advocate.
Well, that's nonsense.
That can be debated, and I'll give you a right of reply as we move into the third and final hour. But for now, I'm going to flag more coming up. We'll bring you the latest on the Middle East after Iran fired missiles at Israel. But first, coming up, as you are looking at live footage in the Middle East, we're going to bring you all the latest with your weather.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's been a pretty wet start to summer and it does look like that is going to continue into the new week. However, there is some sunnier spells in the forecast for the next couple of days. But for this morning and for the rest of the afternoon, we do have some heavy showers across central England, which are slowly moving their way eastwards. Now, some of these are going to be heavy. We could see up to 20 millimetres falling within a couple of hours, possibly even the odd rumble of thunder. But for the rest of the UK, we do see the return of sunnier spells. There is a few showers across Northern Ireland, but temperatures are on the cooler side, especially for the time of year. Highs of around 15 or 16 degrees, maybe an 18 or 19 in the very far southeast. But through this evening, some of these showers may linger through the evening across East Anglia and Kent, but elsewhere we will get some nice evening sunshine for much of England and northern Wales. We do have some showers which can be heavy across Northern Ireland as well, and they are moving in towards western Scotland. Further towards the east, we will see some evening sunshine here too. 1 or 2 showers dotted around, but they are moving their way off towards the North Sea as well. Now, as we go through the overnight period, you'll see the swirl of cloud and rain up towards the northwest, which is bringing these showers towards the western half of the UK. Some of these could potentially be heavy, but clearer skies out towards the southeast. Here we could see temperatures dipping into those mid-single figures, so it will feel rather chilly to start Tuesday. But as the sun comes up, it will be a nice start. But as we go through the day, showers will develop for pretty much everywhere as we head through the morning and into the afternoon. Some of these are likely to be heavy, chiefly across the northern half of the UK, and we could potentially see some thundery outbreaks as well. It's still on the cool side, temperatures around the mid-teens, so it's a couple of degrees lower than the June average.
Today, clouds overhead. Total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pearce.
And me, Miriam Gates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
Bold. They are under no illusion. Ray, are you a human trafficker? Boundless. I've had enough of the nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say it.
Don't get us on the BBC.
Every weeknight, I tear through the headlines. The smell of gasoline. Should we be worried about it? From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos.
I'm going to do now, they are throwing things out the car as we speak.
Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christie's tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country. There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor. Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Dormy, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From court mornings
to warm family brunches,
from football to tennis in the car,
in the kitchen.
GB News Breakfast is there with the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
We're here again.
To start your day just right. GB News Breakfast.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world. Am I allowed to talk now? No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up? About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Some people enjoy lazy Sunday mornings, but not me.
What's the truth of the matter? So that's a very live question.
Would you support him if he waters down these plans?
Before the spin sets in, I'll be getting to the truth.
This is personal.
No soft questions, no easy answers.
It's one thing if the state has rules in this country. It's another thing whether the police and others actually police them.
Setting the agenda and holding those in power to account.
You can't really blame her if the system is set up this way.
You will not want to miss it, trust me. The Camilla Tominey Show, Sundays from 9:30, only on GB News.
Good morning, Britain. Good evening, America. Hello, wherever you're watching around the world. We are live from London, England. This is GB News, the People's Channel, with the stories shaping Britain and America. Tonight on the show. I'm getting so sick of hearing those sirens. President Trump's fired off warnings to both Iran and Israel after hostilities resumed in the Middle East in the last few hours. This is an ongoing story. We're going to be bringing you all the latest. Also, Green Party leader Zach Polanski will today claim that the farming system is close to collapse and tell agricultural workers they're being sneered at by big business. He claims he's got the answers. Property is theft, maybe one of them. Is he right? And in another blow to the hospitality industry, could we be witnessing the end of the dinner date? Single people are increasingly choosing to meet potential partners over coffee rather than shell out for a meal as finances hit romances. I'm Will Kingston and this is The Late Show Live. Welcome to The Late Show Live. Joining me this evening in London is my panel, GB News contributor and comedian Paul Cox and political commentator Benjamin Butterworth. And in Washington we have US political reporter from the Daily Mail, Victoria Churchill, and former Chief of Staff for Marco Rubio, Matt Terrell. Thank you for joining us tonight. Well, breaking tonight, Israel has come under fire from Iranian missiles this evening as the situation in the Middle East hangs in the balance. The IDF said 10 ballistic missiles were fired at northern Israel earlier. All were intercepted and there were no injuries. It's the first time Iran has targeted Israel since the ceasefire in April, and it came after Israel launched an attack on Beirut earlier today. Iran's IRGC said the attacks were a warning. Israel claims it will respond forcefully. Speaking on Fox News a short time ago, Donald Trump, who's been working on a deal with Iran, told them, "You've shot your missiles, that's enough." Earlier today, on NBC, I should say, he said a deal was close.
Their Navy is gone, their Air Force is gone, their anti-aircraft is gone. They might have built it up a little bit over the last 4 weeks during this little ceasefire. We're very close to having a deal, and if we don't have a deal, we'll do it one way or the other. Either way, we win.
And the Financial Times is reporting Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will have no choice to accept whatever deal the US negotiates with Iran, according to US President Donald Trump, who made those comments in an interview with the newspaper. The US President said he calls the shots, adding he won't, as in Benjamin Netanyahu, won't have any choice. Well, with me now, friend of the show, Lisa Daftari, Editor-in-Chief at the Foreign Desk. Lisa, a delight to see you once again. The saga rolls on. We've talked about the rhetoric of President Donald Trump. We've heard a deal is close for some time now. Personally, for me, the words don't quite have the same currency as they used to. What do you read into the President's comments?
Yeah, I never believed we were close to a deal. And at this hour, we are probably farther from that than ever before. This does not look like a regime that looks like it's making concessions or sitting down to sign a deal when they're lobbing missiles into Israel or Kuwait or Bahrain or anywhere else, or making threats, continuing to make threats to even launch them close to the United States. So, this doesn't look like we're getting anywhere close to a deal. Whether the president is invoking the strategy of ambiguity or the strategy of patience, whatever it may be that he has up his sleeve, I don't think that he is naive to this adversary. I think he understands the nature of this regime very well, but the regime also understands Donald Trump very well. By their calculation, Donald Trump does not have an appetite to go further in this war kinetically. And so I believe that they thought they could serve up this missile into Israel and have Donald Trump tie Israel's hands, as he said he would do. He said he spoke to Bibi Netanyahu and he would have to cool it for now because he is close to a deal. So we shall see what's going to happen in the hours and days to come. But in the meantime, I don't think we are anywhere close to getting the type of deal that Donald Trump would find acceptable. And we have to remember his bottom line is no nuclear weapons. We're not even talking about nuclear weapons or the handing over of enrichment. We're talking about Hormuz. We're talking about Hezbollah in Lebanon. We're talking about them not firing missiles into Israel and to neighboring Arab states. They have completely pivoted the arena of this war, and it is now on their terms. So some sort of deterrence or some sort of recalibration will have to happen, whether that happens at the hands of Israel or the United States or a combination of the two, we shall see.
Yeah, I recall you being similarly hawkish last night. It's a sentiment I agree with. On Israel's actions in Lebanon, which led to Iran strikes on Israel earlier, I will say, that Hezbollah have been attacking Israel for years. They are within their rights to be attacking Hezbollah, a terrorist organisation. I've got no problem seeing them wiped off the map. At the same time, is it possible to suggest that, given there is a fragile ceasefire in place, the actions of Israel may not have been helpful in getting to a deal between Israel and Iran?
That's what they would want you to believe, right? But there's two things here. One, we cannot separate the actions of the regime from their proxies. This is all under the same umbrella. From 1979 till now, they have said death to America, death to Israel. They created these deadly proxies, and they have acted upon death to America and death to Israel. They have American blood on their hands. They have European blood on their hands. They have Israeli blood on their hands, and they will continue to do that. Any sort of space or money or concessions that we make towards them will be used again to build up its nuclear program, to build up its missiles and drones, and to fund those same deadly proxies. So what is a good deal anyway? And how would we verify such a deal when they shut off the surveillance cameras, they don't give access to the inspectors when they try to make them, and they hide the uranium? So who are we? A, who are we dealing with? B, what are we getting in that deal? And C, when we have the opportunity of a lifetime at a regime that is degraded to a certain extent, perhaps not far enough, but to a certain extent, why would we now throw them a lifeline and rescue them so that they can continue on for another 5 decades of doing exactly what they have with their deadly agenda?
The point that you made, that you cannot separate Iran's proxies from the Iranian regime, is a very, very good one. I spoke to Elon Levy not so long ago, and this was actually before the attack on Iran, or the war in Iran, when he was referring to the conflict against Hamas, and he said that this shouldn't be considered or framed as a conflict between Israel and Hamas or Palestine. It is very much a conflict against Iran and 7 proxy armies that they have been fighting for years and years. And I actually don't think that the story has been told well enough by Israel and the United States in that regard. But on the likelihood of a deal and what that would mean, I said earlier in the previous hour that since the fall of the Shah, Iran have never stuck to any agreements that they have made. They've never negotiated in good faith. So why should we, even if Trump announces some sort of a deal, which he probably will, why should we actually give that deal any legitimacy whatsoever when the Iranians most likely will just ignore it in the months or years to come?
Absolutely. And look, when you said the word legitimacy, a light bulb went off in my head, and I'm going to share that thought. They have no legitimacy at home. So their biggest reckoning will be with their own people. Look, in January, 30 to 50,000 Iranians came out into the streets in protest because of basic freedoms, democracy, freedom, wear what we want, say what we want, repressions, economy, all of it. And they were slaughtered in wholesale fashion with military-grade weapons. Well, that is one of the reasons, not the main reason, but one of the reasons why Donald Trump got involved in this war, because it was the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. Those same Iranians are ready. They want to come out onto the streets. They want to reclaim their country. That disenchantment is not going to disappear with a deal, with a meaningless piece of paper. The Iranian people have told us for years, if you want to go back, not 47 years perhaps, but in 1999 was the first recorded student-led protest on the university campuses. Then we saw the Green Revolution of 2009, and so on and so on and so on, which culminated in this past January, where the Iranian people will not back down from reclaiming their country. To them, this regime is not meant to be reformed or to make concessions. This regime has to go. The very existence of this regime will continue to mean death to America and death to Israel. It will continue to mean wanting deadly weapons, like nuclear weapons, like missiles, like drones, like proxies. And to your point about the story not being told well here in the West, yes, it is partially the fault of the Western media, not all outlets. I know GBNews does a wonderful job at this, but it is also the proactive narrative warfare that is being launched here in the West by Iran's regime. Again, all of this goes under the same umbrella. Do you remember the college encampments, the protests that were in favor of Hamas and Hezbollah on U.S. college campuses? That was orchestrated and paid for by Iran's regime. When you look at so many of our professors professors and our the experts that come on cable news, and you look at the labs and the schools and the authors and the think tanks that have been captured and paid by Iran's regime, this is all part of their narrative warfare, and that is why the story is not being told well. Also, when you separate it as, no, this is a war against Israel against Hezbollah, or Israel against Lebanon, or Israel against the Palestinians, or, you know, they have found a way to separate themselves from the main story. And to your point, it is all being funded by Iran's regime. And this is the moment that we can put an end to all of this and not kick the can down the road for the next administration. That's probably what they're waiting for, a more friendly to the regime administration to come up and to serve them more billions of dollars and a better deal, and so they can continue on with their same deadly agenda.
It's well said, Lisa. My final question goes to the start of your answer there, where you talked about the possibility of regime change. I have, and again, I think we all hope and pray for that to happen, but I have mixed feelings about it. In one respect, the Iranian regime is weaker than it has ever been militarily, economically, in terms of the IP or leadership layer at the very top. At the same time, and it is devastating to acknowledge, but they wiped out, we don't know exact numbers, potentially up to 40,000 odd protesters in those brutal crackdowns on protests earlier in the year. Those 40,000 people would have been some of the bravest and most courageous, and they sacrificed their lives in pursuit of an incredibly noble cause. But those people will not be there for the time when the next uprising needs to happen. How likely do you think it is, given those competing considerations, that there can be the possibility of regime change in the months or years ahead?
I think it's a foregone conclusion. I think when you look at the population that is highly educated, highly Western facing, they understand technology, they're on social media, they are well prepared to join the global community. There are so many worthy individuals, 90 million Iranians inside Iran. The majority of them don't want this regime. They want freedom. They want secularism. They want democracy. They don't have any of those things. What they need is somebody to lead them to free elections and to get them to the place where the proper candidates, those who are worthy, those who can do this, can step up in an environment where they're not fearful for their lives to run for office. Now, I'm sure if you followed the protests, you know that the Iranians, the majority of the protesters that were out on the streets were holding signs calling for Reza Pahlavi, the son of the late Shah, to come back to Iran to lead them to those elections. He has not talked about starting a monarchy or going back to being the king of Iran or any sort of power grab. What he has done is stepped up to communicate with the people of Iran and offered himself up as that transitional leader, somebody who understands the West, who's in touch with the White House, somebody who has gone to Israel, has met with Bibi Netanyahu, and somebody who obviously understands Iran and the patchwork of the many Iranian people who live in that country, and to lead them, again, to free elections so that they can pave the way forward for themselves. But again, what we're hearing from the Iranian people, we don't know who that person will be that will lead them. We don't know what kind of government it will be, but we know that they want secularism, they want democracy, and they want to be free from this yoke of repression, of radicalism, of suppression that they have been under for 47 years.
Well, we can only hope that that happens. Lisa, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining me this morning.
Thank you.
That was Lisa Daftari. I always enjoy speaking to Lisa, incredibly knowledgeable on geopolitics. Matt, I'll go to you first. We haven't touched on in detail the domestic ramifications of the war in as much detail as I would like. Let's go there. In one respect, I think I heard from someone earlier, I can't recall, that it may have been from you, saying Donald Trump wouldn't care too much about the midterms. In some respects, I agree with you. I don't think he's ever really particularly cared about many Republican politicians. I think it's been about the broader MAGA movement. At the same time, potentially a hammering in these midterms could be a stain on his legacy. How do you think this plays out in the months ahead?
Well, first and foremost, yes, President Trump, Republicans, they have a majority in Congress right now. But in the Senate in particular, they kind of don't. What I mean by that is you've got Senator Tillis in North Carolina. You've had, John Cornyn in Texas, who've been holding up key pieces of legislation that President Trump has wanted to get across the finish line. But let's put that aside and focus in on just what's happening in the day-to-day lives of American voters. What they will care about, priority number one, will be the issue of the economy, the issue of prices. And what you are seeing is that you've seen under President Trump gas prices lower than where they were under President Biden. Yes, at the start of this conflict in particular, you've seen those prices go up. But I think you're going to see those prices come down here on the heels of this conflict ending. And part of that is just what President Trump has been doing in his second term here, investing and ensuring that America is energy independent. That drill, baby, drill, notion that President Trump has put in place. But look, beyond that, it's also been regulation and other things that he has put aside to ensure that we do become energy independent here in the United States. That's been critical. But with all that said, it is going to matter going into September, October in particular, and November when Americans are going to the polls where prices are. But there are things that show strong signs of the economy. You've seen the stock market hitting all-time highs. You're seeing strong GDP growth. You saw the May jobs report come out, far better than what people were predicting. You saw over 170,000 jobs created in the month of May here in the United States. So you're seeing these positive signs in the economy. But if you're President Trump and Republicans, you really want to see those signs kick into full swing, full gear, seeing gas prices down, going into September, October. That's when Americans will be paying attention to the politics. They're not paying attention right now. Americans are focused on family vacations and enjoying the summer. Yes, they're concerned about gas prices, but again, compared to the Biden years, those are doing better. I think President Trump's going to have a good story to tell on the economy. That's what Americans are going to care about going into the election day.
Yeah, Victoria, I was listening to the Editor's podcast from National Review, which is one of my favourites, a couple of days ago. They were debating whether or not Trump is entering his lame duck phase as president. For people who aren't aware, the lame duck phase is generally after, in the final 2 years of a president's second term, or first term if he gets, or second term I should say, where there is no prospect of him being re-elected. Maybe some ultra-MAGA figures would dispute that, but let's say it is most likely that Trump is not going to get a third term in office. Number one, do you think Trump has entered his lame duck phase? Yes or no? And two, what do you think that lame duck phase will look like, and how do you think he will, what areas will he invest his time and energy into?
Well, as Matt pointed out, there's already Republican members of Congress that are actually themselves lame ducks that are willing to go against the president's agenda. So I think that's pretty notable. I think Trump will never consider himself a lame duck really until his last day in office. It's going to be January 19th, 2029. So that is still quite a ways ahead. But, I think he is still going to say, he won all the swing states in a landslide back in 2024. And so he still sees kind of the will of the American people with him, regardless of how, day-to-day polling shakes out and things like that. I do think that it's interesting to look at particularly some not so much the heavily Republican seats, but some of the more swing seats. I think this war, the longer it drags on, is a vulnerability for Republicans going into the midterms. So even though Trump himself may not feel it, there are definitely Republicans on the ballot that will be on the ballot this November that are looking at that and are looking at it quite heavily. But I also think it's interesting to note how nationwide really see what Trump's role in the Republican Party is going to be. We've already seen, for example, just last week in Iowa, the Trump-endorsed candidate for governor ended up not being the nominee out of the primaries. We have a contest in South Carolina coming up this Tuesday in a primary election where I think people were a little bit confused why President Trump endorsed who he did in that primary, and so it'll be interesting to see whether another candidate that has his endorsement goes down, or whether his endorsement is going to be able to shepherd that person out of the primaries as he has in most other cases in the primaries. And so I think really these in-state contests are actually a really good look about how the Republican base feels about the president and the power of his endorsement. And I think at the end of the day, that is going to see how much not having his name on the ballot is going to play into people actually being able to be energetic and get out and actually get out and vote for people that either have his endorsement or may not necessarily in some of these contests. And so I think, there's definitely a lot of factors that point to the Republican base still being with him, but there are kind of some emergences of people saying, you know what, we're going to make our own decisions, especially here in our more local and more state elections. And so, that's kind of really what we're seeing play out here is this big debate about whether Trump still has an iron grip on the Republican Party or not.
Yeah. Benjamin, your reflections on what you've heard?
Well, I mean, I think this is Donald Trump's mess, to be honest. It looks like he didn't have a particularly coherent strategy in the first place. It's had a negative effect on the US and world economy. He's not managed to get a deal despite this being his big USP as a politician after many months, and it doesn't look like there's any prospect of fixing the problem soon. And so I think it would be quite legitimate if US voters look at that situation and punish Republicans as a consequence of his mess. I really hope he does fix it, but he has not only messed it up quite badly so far, but also he's alienated many allies. He's been going around the world lecturing and hectoring allies of the US for not supporting him, when at times it feels like he himself can't explain the strategy or the goal. And I think until he figures that out, voters and allies alike will be well within their rights to not support him. Paul?
I think ultimately Donald Trump will be seen as a very good president in history. I genuinely believe that, and I sometimes I've sat on the fence with Trump. I'm certainly someone who's very interested in Trump. I think he is great for the US and great for the world, actually. However, we talk about Republicans and Democrats like they're the convention in the US, and they certainly are. However, this guise of the Republican Party is entirely built in Donald Trump's image. So I don't think we can treat these last 2 years of his final presidency in the same way as we would do any other president in American history. So I think it's going to be incredibly interesting, irrespective of what the midterms tell us.
Yeah, that is a fascinating question. How will Donald Trump be viewed by history? The old line goes that history is written by the winners. I think when it comes to presidential history, history is written by the leftists. Whenever you see those rankings of American presidents, they come out with some shockingly biased results, where you have Reagan, for example, well down the list, and people like Biden and Obama certainly much higher than I would put them. So I wonder whether or not that legacy, at least amongst the historical progressive class, will be there, but he will certainly be remembered, in my opinion, as the most consequential president since FDR, for perhaps for better and for worse. Still ahead on The Late Show Live, Green Party leader Zach Polanski will today claim that the farming system is close to collapse and tell agricultural workers they're being sneered at by big business. He claims he's got the answers. Is he right? Also tonight, and in another blow to the hospitality industry, could we be witnessing the end of the dinner date? Single people are increasingly choosing to meet potential partners over coffee. Oh dear. Rather than shelling out for a meal and perhaps a pint as finances hit romances. First though, your weather update.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boiler sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's been a pretty wet start to summer and it does look like that is going to continue into the new week. However, there is some sunnier spells in the forecast for the next couple of days. But for this morning and for the rest of the afternoon, we do have some heavy showers across central England, which are slowly moving their way eastwards. Now, some of these are going to be heavy. We could see up to 20 millimetres falling within a couple of hours, possibly even the odd rumble of thunder. But for the rest of the UK, we do see the return of sunnier spells. There is a few showers across Northern Ireland, but temperatures are on the cooler side, especially for the time of year. Highs of around 15 or 16 degrees, maybe an 18 or 19 in the very far southeast. But through this evening, some of these showers may linger through the evening across East Anglia and Kent, but elsewhere we will get some nice evening sunshine for much of England and northern Wales. We do have some showers which can be heavy across Northern Ireland as well, and they are moving in towards western Scotland. Further towards the east, we will see some evening sunshine here too. 1 or 2 showers dotted around, but they are moving their way off towards the North Sea as well. Now, as we go through the overnight period, you'll see the swirl of cloud and rain up towards the northwest, which is bringing these showers towards the western half of the UK. Some of these could potentially be heavy, but clearer skies out towards the southeast. Here we could see temperatures dipping into those mid-single figures, so it will feel rather chilly to start Tuesday. But as the sun comes up, it will be a nice start. But as we go through the day, showers will develop for pretty much everywhere as we head through the morning and into the afternoon. Some of these are likely to be heavy, chiefly across the northern half of the UK, and we could potentially see some thundery outbreaks as well. It's still on the cool side, temperatures around the mid-teens, so it's a couple of degrees lower than the June average.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live, ladies and gentlemen. I want to go back to what is the most important story in this country at the moment. That is the atrocious murder of Henry Novak. You can rest assured that on this channel we will not lose focus on his death and indeed what needs to be done across our institutions to ensure justice for him, but also that the lessons are learnt. In many ways, it is this sort of tragedy is the reason why this channel exists. I also had, I think, a very, very poignant message that came from Joan earlier, and Joan said about 15 minutes ago, "I haven't been able to sleep since Henry. I'm going to give it a go now." Night all. Well, Joan, sleep tight, and I know that your feelings are feelings that are shared by so many people across this country. This story, in so many ways, I think has hit people on an emotional level in a way which no other story has. The rape gangs, I think, shocked us to our very core, and it was an unimaginable atrocity, and it is an unimaginable atrocity still on a mass scale. But there is something about that footage which I think brings into focus the injustice in such a visceral way, which has really, really shocked and hurt so many people. And I think that's why people like Joan still can't sleep. So it's something which we're going to keep talking about. Of course, the main update when it comes to this story was from the interaction between David Lammy and JD Vance. In a call on the weekend, David Lammy called JD Vance to pick up on comments he made about the death of Henry Novak. The Vice President blamed Henry's death on two-tier policing and what he called a mass invasion of migrants. These comments were also echoed by Pete Hegseth in a speech on D-Day. The Deputy Prime Minister hit back against those comments.
Disagree with him. This has got nothing to do with mass migration. This young man was a Brit. Let's be clear about that. And I said, look, Mr. Vice President, you're wrong about this. And it's also the case that actually murder is coming down in the United Kingdom. So we had an agreeable conversation, but we disagree.
Lammy also rejected the idea that Britain has two-tier policing. But in breaking news tonight, the founder of Iceland, Sir Malcolm Walker, has intervened to say that two-tier policing does indeed exist and not just on the streets. He gave the example of an Asian shop worker who was handcuffed by police after a black customer he'd confronted for tampering with stock accused him of racism. But despite the events this week, the police race watchdog, Abimbola Johnson, has claimed tonight that forces still aren't doing enough to combat institutional racism. And of course, Abimbola is not referring to the institutional racism, which I would suggest is now there against white British people. That person is, of course, referring to institutional racism against minority groups. Let's go to the panel. Benjamin, we talked about the first element of what JD Vance referred to in terms of mass migration and multiculturalism. I want to talk about that second element on two-tier policing. Now, David Lammy, in an interview with the BBC, And as an aside, how extraordinary that the BBC is now talking about two-tier policing. We very helpfully got this clip. Let's have a look at his interview with the BBC.
They call two-tier policing. And I want to show everyone the guidance that they've talked about to kind of prove that point that you've already referred to. This is a police chief's guidance. It says, our commitment to racial equity means producing equality of policing outcomes for people from different ethnic groups. Now, that's a bit of a word salad, but this is the really key phrase. It does not mean treating everyone the same or being colourblind. One of your colleagues, Sarah Jones, the policing minister, says the language in that is wrong. It gives the wrong impression.
You said it's a bit of a word salad. It needs review.
Well, number one, and allow me an indulgence, how refreshing to hear the BBC talking about two-tier policing. You know, I'm going to call this the GBNews effect, dragging the mainstream media and establishment figures to the important stories that they haven't been talking about. I don't think that the BBC would dare talk about this if we hadn't been on the case for some time now. But more importantly than media squabbles, it is the response of David Lammy. And it is extraordinary, Benjamin. He's got evidence which is put directly to him, which is police guidelines which say that particular ethnicity should be treated differently to others. You've seen that footage from Henry Novak's death, which is so black and white. It is so obvious. I'm not going to cop this whole, well, we need to have the inquiry to know what really went on. Everyone can see what has happened. How can David Lammy still deny to this day that there is not two-tier policing in this country?
Well, if there's inadequate policing, it is more often against ethnic minorities who we know have worse relationships with the police, are more likely to be stopped and searched, more likely to be pulled over, more likely to suffer unreasonable treatment in police custody. There is report after report illustrating that. What this shouldn't be, and what the family always said it shouldn't be, is used to divide and stir people and cause rage. That is what is wrong. The fact that clearly what the police did in the case of Henry Novak was incredibly unacceptable. It does not mean that there isn't prejudice and unacceptable outcomes for black and other ethnic minorities in this country. There absolutely is. And trying to pit these two things against each other is not solving either of those problems.
Paul, here's the thing, though. I think, you know, the framing that Benjamin just made may have actually been true, you know, in the past, but there has obviously, in my eyes, been an overcorrection to the point where that institutional racism that may well have been there against particular minority groups has now flipped because of the institutionalised social justice policies post-Macpherson, to the extent now that that framing is an out-of-date framing, and the real racism now, which is a racism which we can't talk about in the same way that you can talk about prejudice against minority groups, is against white people in the police forces of this country.
Firstly, may I earnestly request that Benjamin stop using the words of Henry Novak's father to scaffold his argument. Henry Novak's father...
Why won't you listen to the family, Paul?
Let me talk.
Well,
let me talk.
Why don't you say something that considers what the family said?
I still haven't answered my question from about 2 hours ago. Look, let me just tell you something. You took a few seconds of what Henry's father said in that incredible emotional speech and have used it ever since. You're the one using it, not me.
What, listening to the family?
Listen to me just for a moment. That what Henry's father and Henry's family want, and what the wider public want, is for Henry's legacy to be a positive one. To keep using that, which was quite clearly put in there, to try and stick to the convention, is not going to maintain Henry Novak's legacy. That is only going to come from us being able to freely talk about it. The type of thing that you talked about ethnic minorities being mistreated by the police, and that's held up by some report, yada, yada, yada. I think that's absolute nonsense.
Based on what? What evidence do you have?
I don't think you could prove that. I genuinely don't think you could prove that. I think the reason you've become so sure... I don't need evidence.
You don't need evidence.
You need evidence.
What, you just have a narrative that stirs up racial hatred and that's enough? Why don't you look at the evidence? There was a report in 2023 that called out institutional racism against ethnic minorities in the police.
That convention has failed us, has led to the death of Henry Novak, and people on the left
so every black person is making
ashamed.
it up, are they?
People on the left should be apologising. David Lammy shouldn't be sitting there defending anything. He should be apologising for propping up this environment.
What, you think you know more about racism than David Lammy?
I think I do know a lot about racism, and I'm not saying I know more than David Lammy.
All you've got is a white victimhood that you can't stop executing the grievance. You are using this boy and his family to play into a narrative that you had regardless of what happened.
It won't work.
It's nothing to do with that.
Stop. I'm hosting. Benjamin, I've got a question for you. Do you think that if the explicit wishes of the Novak family were to see an end to two-tier policing and institutionalised social justice and DEI agendas within the police forces of this country, would the left be as deferential to those wishes as they have been?
But that's an irrelevant question.
No, it's not.
Well, it is, because it's not what they asked for.
I know.
What they said.
I agree.
You can't just make up things that they might have said.
It's a television
they didn't
show.
say that. They said that this should not be used for division or for hatred. And that has not been how it's been interpreted by some.
Benjamin, don't cop out. This is called a thought experiment to underline whether or not there is a sincerity behind what the left is saying. Answer the question, would they be as deferential if those were the wishes?
But they didn't say it. It's a completely redundant question. It's like saying, you know, if they said that they love Keir Starmer, would you be deferential to it in the way that you are now? It's a pointless question. It's not what they said. And actually, the reason it's a pointless question is because these are the people who lost their loved one, who've seen all the evidence, who've been through it, and the conclusion they came to was that this division and this pure cold rage that Nigel Farage spoke of would not solve anything. And it is fine to discuss it freely. It is another thing to use it to play into narratives that you had regardless of this case, and to claim that you've changed your opinion or that it's based on this is just not true. You have a grievance you're trying to execute.
OK, two responses to that. Number one, how do I phrase this? We need to be incredibly delicate around the wishes of the Novak family, and we should also respect and admire how strong they have been. But at the same time, their wishes are one very important factor among many factors in what is now a national conversation. Their wishes are not the be-all and end-all of how we think about learning lessons around two-tier policing and the ideological capture of institutions. That's never been a precedent in this country to say that the wishes of particular victims' families dictate how we talk about difficult problems in society. But the second thing I would say is, if we don't talk about those difficult issues now, when will we talk about them? The public will move on, the politicians will move on, this story will fade from memory, and the politicians will get away with this once again. You need to have uncomfortable conversations now, or else you never have them. That is the pattern. But I will go back to you, Paul, and I'll ask the question that Benjamin didn't answer, and that is, if the explicit wishes, and again it is a thought experiment, if the explicit wishes of the Novak family were to end two-tier policing, do you think the left and Labor would just be saying, well, we must admire their wishes?
No. I fear, and I somewhat guess, that they would say that was racist. Because that is the benchmark for absolutely everything. This is why I said earlier, a paradigm is a benchmark. I'm not saying there's no racism out there. I'm saying that the paradigm of the ultra-liberal left is to create racism to the point that everything is racist, so Benjamin can do exactly what he did to my argument, which was call me... I've barely been a victim of white racism. I'm no victim in this. I'm standing
You made up a grievance that you gave no evidence for.
No, I didn't make up a grievance. What are you doing, Benjamin?
Benjamin,
let me talk. I don't know what arena you normally sit in where everybody gets to listen to you no matter what you say, but this
why
isn't
don't you say
it.
things with evidence?
Okay.
No, I asked you for evidence.
OK, we're going around in circles here, and just to clarify for the sake of the audience, I did not invent comments.
You did.
Yeah, I did not invent...
You invented a conclusion that they never said, and then asked what would happen if that
Stop interrupting me. Stop. I did not invent comments. It was a thought experiment. You're a clever guy, Benjamin. You know that. You are being deliberately misleading. I'm going to go now to Matt. Matt, your reflections on this tragic story from the United States and indeed from what you've just heard.
Yeah, first and foremost, thoughts and prayers are with the family, loved ones, friends of Henry. This is a horrific story. I've seen the footage that occurred. This is a very sad situation. And look, I'll be honest with you, I believe that race should never be the driving factor in law enforcement. Law enforcement should come down to one simple principle: helping those in need. Henry was in need, and he did not get the help he needed from law enforcement. And you should not have two different tiers of law enforcement, or 3 or 4. There should be one tier, and that tier should not be driven by race, but driven by doing the right thing. Law enforcement did not do the right thing in Henry's case. And look, Vice President Vance weighed in on this, and I think he was spot on in every single thing he said. You have to remember, Vice President Vance is vice president today because he and President Trump campaigned on ensuring that law enforcement could do their jobs. You didn't have that in many cases under President Biden. He campaigned with President Trump in 2024 on securing the border. You didn't have that under President Biden. And I think one thing that's being not talked about enough right now is the importance of enforcing the law. You know, when we enforce the law here in the United States under President Trump, for example, securing the border, for example, deporting those who are illegally in the country, that's enforcing the law. It's illegal to be in a country illegally. We've seen that under President Biden in the United States not be enforced. You're seeing immigration law be enforced in the United States under President Trump. And the problem you have right now in the UK is that you're not enforcing immigration law. And I think one of the points that Vice President Vance, in the broader context, was trying to make here is when you don't enforce your laws, such as enforcing immigration law, then you have a trickle-down impact. You basically say to citizens, you know, we as a government are not going to enforce this law, so do you really have to follow any laws? You know, it's kind of like the broken window theory in New York in the 1990s that Mayor Giuliani put in place. It was a notion to enforce all laws. And that's not just giving a message to citizens to obey the law, but it's also giving a message to law enforcement, police officers, that you have the right to enforce the law. And I think the challenge you have in the UK right now is a very similar challenge we had under President Biden. President Biden not enforce all of our laws, such as on ensuring that he secured the border, ensuring that those who are in the country illegally were deported. You're having very similar situations here in the UK, and I suspect, I don't want to speak for the Vice President, but that was one of the broader messages being sent here. And it is a major concern for people in the UK about illegal immigration. And I think when you do not enforce the law, you have situations where people don't always follow the law or think they have to follow the law, and you send a mixed message to law enforcement. And it may not totally correlate exactly word for word to this situation, but there's a broader context taking place in the UK beyond this just sad, horrific story that needs to be addressed, and I think it's worth addressing now.
Yeah, I think there are some similarities and some differences with the US. I actually think it's not necessarily all the time about not enforcing the law. There are many laws in this country which actively are promoting immigration problems, like, for example, the Human Rights Act, like, for example, the Refugee Convention, the ECHR. These are all actually laws which are barriers to actually achieving the types of outcomes that sensible people would like to see. Victoria, your thoughts on what you've heard?
I mean, I think, again, it's really interesting to see what lessons the UK is going to learn from this, if any. I think that there are lessons to be learned, but I also think that, you know, you don't want to swing the pendulum in the completely opposite direction. And so I think that, you know, Lamy himself, right, said in that BBC interview that if those are the statutes that are in place with police, that those need to be revisited. And so I think this is really kind of bringing a magnifying glass to the problems that already exist. And, you know, if I was a lawmaker in the UK, I would make sure to do everything in my power to make sure that a situation like this never happened again.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I will repeat what I said earlier. We are going to continue focusing on this story, not just for justice for Henry Novak and for his family, but because, in my opinion, this needs to be a sad but necessary call for change. And a call for change, not just across policing, but across how we think about the two-tier nature of British society today. We're going to leave it there, though, because we have some breaking news coming to you from the Middle East, and this is a significant update in the Iran war. There have been sounds of explosions in Tehran, Tabriz and Isfahan, I should say, in Iran. Local media reported. Axios, citing the IDF, reported that the Israeli Air Force has attacked military targets in western and central Iran a short time ago. It added the Israeli Air Force has struck military targets belonging to the Iranian regime in western and central Iran. We've got Lisa Daftari, Editor-in-Chief at the Foreign Desk, back with us. Lisa, thank you for staying on the line. Well, Donald Trump's requests to Israel not to retaliate appear to have fallen on deaf ears.
Or again, we go back to this strategy of ambiguity, and something was agreed upon between the two gentlemen, who again, I'm told by sources very close to the two that they are lock in step and have been throughout the process. While they can have disagreements, with various details, they are lock in step with what they would like to see happen with Iran's regime. Now, remember, this is a goal that they both had. The United States got involved in the 12-day war last June, and again with Epic Fury February 28th. So again, we are partners in all of this. Israel being hit, Israel's a sovereign state, obviously. They are fighting an existential fight with Iran's regime being an arm's length away and vowing to blow Israel off the map and acting upon it, encircling it with its proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and of course its own missiles coming from Iran proper today, as we saw. I think Israel made the right move by retaliating sooner rather than later, by showing deterrence here. There has to be a recalibration in this war. Iran's regime, we have said several times, mere survival is victory for them. And not only do they think that they're victorious at this moment, they actually think they have the upper hand. So by lobbing a missile into Israel, they were testing the waters. They wanted to test the will of the Israelis, see how Donald Trump would react. Donald Trump, they assume, is very much nervous right now because he wants a deal more than the Iranian regime wants a deal by their calculation. So this really is a reset of the attempt at diplomacy here. I have said from the moment we went into a ceasefire, this was not going to be a true ceasefire. They wanted us to cease and for them to fire. And as you're watching on your screen right now, that's exactly what has been happening. Just over the weekend, they lobbed drones into around the Strait of Hormuz that were knocked down by the United States, and they accused the United States of breaking the ceasefire. So, as we said before, this is a duplicitous regime that will use every last missile and drone they will fire off. They will use every last proxy to fight and to kill and to target Israel and the United States. They have not forgotten about that agenda. Now, what does this do with the negotiations? Of course, we will have to wait and see, but obviously this looks like we are headed towards more kinetic action tonight.
Yeah, the footage that we are seeing is not live. This is footage from earlier, and this was the missiles that Iran launched against Israel. And these are the footage you can see of those bright lights in the sky are those missiles being intercepted. We remind you that, fortunately, no one was injured in those strikes by Iran on Israel. Lisa, this almost sounds like a silly question because we're literally watching missiles being targeted at Israel at the moment, but there has been some skirmishes over the last couple of weeks whilst the ceasefire has been in place, but surely we can say now that this ceasefire is over.
Yeah, absolutely. The ceasefire is over. Did they even deserve the ceasefire to begin with? No, but Donald Trump did want to have an attempt at diplomacy. But again, all throughout that, it should have been well communicated to the Iran regime that the finger was on the trigger and that the United States and Israel both have the appetite to go back to military war if that should be the only way out. And Donald Trump has said, and he said in his interview with NBC earlier this weekend, that one way or another, we will win. And that really, to me, that was basically a hint as to if we need to go back to kinetic warfare, we will have to do just that. Look, the Iran regime, we've said this, they have not been, it wasn't created to be reformed. It wasn't created to stop. You can't ask them to pretty please stop with their terrorism. Stop using your missiles, stop using your drones, stop saying death to America and death to Israel. It is part of their DNA, and we cannot ask them to have different DNA or change their DNA. This is who they are. And regardless of the leadership that was eliminated in the early parts of the war, every single one of them that is part of this regime is cut from the same cloth. We will see more of the same. There is no reformist. They're only hard line and harder line. And that is why we are where we are tonight, back to square one.
Yeah, well, you raise another eternal truth, which is that I don't think really that you can negotiate with a genocidal religious death cult, which is what the Iranian regime is, which does draw into question the value of the conversations that are ongoing at the moment. Lisa, that's all we have time for tonight. Thank you very much once again for joining us once more.
Of course, thank you.
Going back to my panel for the final time this morning, and I'll go to the US first. Matt, it hasn't taken long for Israel to retaliate against Iran for the strikes earlier. What do you make of this latest breaking news that is coming out of the Middle East?
Yeah, look, we'll see what President Trump does in full gear here. I think it's important for people to remember that Israel's goal here is not necessarily the same as the United States. For the United States, it is clear that President Trump wants to ensure that Iran does not achieve a nuclear weapon. It's not necessarily to go in for full regime change. I suspect where Israel's at on this is wanting full regime change. So there's just different goals here as you get to the tail end of this conflict. But with that said, I go back to something I said earlier. I don't know what the latest count is here, is whether 4 or roughly 10 missiles that were launched from Iran to Israel. We're not talking about 100 missiles here. And I think the question is Iran running out of missiles, or were they just trying to send kind of a ceremonial shoot of a few missiles off here to show that they're doing something to retaliate? I think in the end, Iran really does know deep down that they need to be careful here. I mean, President Trump very well could kick into doing more military action. He made that clear today during his media appearances that he's keeping military options on the table. And right now, what you have is this economic pressure on Iran, which I think is devastating to Iran. But look, putting full gear military approach into action by President Trump, that is not something I think Iran wants to see. So we'll see what the next steps are here. I do think President Trump has made it clear that he's going to be the driving factor here. He's the one setting the strategy. It's not going to be the Prime Minister of Israel. It's not going to be Iran. He's made it clear to Iran what they need to do here. That is to ensure they do not achieve a nuclear weapon. That is the priority number one from the United States' standpoint. We'll see what happens here with negotiation. But President Trump has been clear he needs Iran to play ball here, and we'll see what next steps are.
This is, of course, latest footage. This is the strikes on Israel earlier. We are still looking for the footage of what we are hearing are strikes from Israel in retaliation back at Iran at military targets in western and central Iran. I would hope and I would assume that there will be footage that will be coming, hopefully by the time we head to the morning show at 6 a.m. Victoria, I'll go to you. Your reflections on this retaliatory strike from Israel back at Iran?
Well, I think this is just President Trump's statements earlier in the week coming into fruition, where he realized that a ceasefire in this part of the world is just less exchange of fire. It's not a complete ceasefire. And so, I'm interested to see how he is kind of going to go about his relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu moving forward, whether he's going to be angry at him. I assume probably not, because again, I think he expects Israel to punch back if they are punched first. And, I'm sure if Trump and Bibi end up on a call in the next day or so, that's probably what Bibi is going to tell him his rationale was. But I also think, again, that this really proves the point that Trump has made in the last week, that he does want this to wrap up eventually, probably sooner rather than later, and that he is the one that can end this conflict. It's not necessarily going to be Israel, and it's not going to be Iran.
Yeah, well, a reminder of that immortal line from President Trump stated that a ceasefire in the Middle East is when you're shooting in a more moderate manner. Very poignant this evening, or this morning, I should say. Benjamin, your final thoughts in 30 seconds.
I mean, ultimately, it won't change anything. This is what we've had for several years now, and there needs to be a more fundamental change. There needs to be a deal, and as Donald Trump says, it's him that's going to do that. So let's hope that that comes sooner rather than later.
Paul Cox, a punchy comment in about 15 to 20 seconds.
I hope that this is ended very, very quickly, and I suspect the only way to do that is through military action.
Yeah, I suspect that may well be the case. Well, that's all we have time for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. It is a night like so often, that there is momentous things happening in the Middle East and across the world, and you can be trusted with GB News as we take you through those. Catch us in the morning with the morning show, where we will be going through the updates from the Middle East. Thank you so much for spending your night with The Late Show Live, though. I will be back next weekend covering once again for Ben. Thank you, of course, to my panel of Victoria, Matt, Benjamin and Paul. Tomorrow night, you'll be back with the wonderful Bev Turner. Make sure you do watch The Late Show tomorrow night. It is a privilege to be in your living rooms. For now, have a lovely morning.
Today, clouds overhead. Total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's been a pretty wet start to summer and it does look like that is going to continue into the new week. However, there is some sunnier spells in the forecast for the next couple of days. But for this morning and for the rest of the afternoon, we do have some heavy showers across central England, which are slowly moving their way eastwards. Now, some of these are going to be heavy. We could see up to 20 millimetres falling within a couple of hours, possibly even the odd rumble of thunder. But for the rest of the UK, we do see the return of sunnier spells. There is a few showers across Northern Ireland, but temperatures are on the cooler side, especially for the time of year. Highs of around 15 or 16 degrees, maybe an 18 or 19 in the very far southeast. But through this evening, some of these showers may linger through the evening across East Anglia and Kent, but elsewhere we will get some nice evening sunshine from much of England and northern Wales. We do have some showers which can be heavy across Northern Ireland as well, and they are moving in towards western Scotland. Further towards the east, we will see some evening sunshine here too. 1 or 2 showers dotted around, but they are moving their way off towards the North Sea as well. Now, as we go through the overnight period, you'll see the swirl of cloud and rain up towards the northwest, which is bringing these showers towards the western half of the UK. Some of these could potentially be heavy, but clearer skies out towards the southeast. Here we could see temperatures dipping into those mid-single figures, so it will feel rather chilly to start Tuesday. But as the sun comes up, it will be a nice start. But as we go through the day, showers will develop for pretty much everywhere as we head through the morning and into the afternoon. Some of these are likely to be heavy, chiefly across the northern half of the UK, and we could potentially see some thundery outbreaks as well. It's still on the cool side, temperatures around the mid-teens, so it's a couple of degrees lower than the June average.
Today, clouds overhead. Total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
5 hosts, 5 opinions, 5 fearless debates, 5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday 5. You got me good there. Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show.
It's not a bad brand.
Yeah. Uncensored.
Very, very racist tonight.
On the unpredictable.
What did she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace
Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me. Do you trust what you're being told? Good, because neither do I.
Those are just facts.
I'm Alex Armstrong, and on my show, we'll expose the spin.
Well, I want to answer that because you didn't let me last time, because you always speak over me.
The broken promises.
To deny that is denying the truth.
And the hypocrisy.
We can allow.
Stop.
We can allow.
Politics, policy, parliament. Nothing is off limits. No sugarcoating, no fear of offence, just the truth laid bare. Tune in every Saturday and Sunday at 9 p.m. for Alex Armstrong Tonight, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised. I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world. Am I allowed to talk now? No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Breaking news, live updates, stories that matter.
From the heart of the GB newsroom to every corner of Britain, with our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
GB News bulletins are there to deliver the latest news that matters to you. Bulletins on GB News,
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The GB News audience is different, it's unique, because they see through the nonsense.
We want to debate with each other, we want to listen and maybe learn.
We have a chat, that's what we do, we try and have a chat.
They'll watch my programme while they're eating their tea, they'll watch breakfast while they're busy getting their kids ready for school.
We want to hear what matters to you, what is news for you.
And what's brought you out here today?
What are the biggest issues affecting this particular area?
The audience are the best thing about GB News.
Their friends, their family. They're people who need to have their voices heard.
They're passionate about the channel, they're passionate about what they believe in.
The one thing about GB News is you get a chance to speak.
Talk to me about why so many people have gathered here today.
Do you want to say something back in return?
The GB News audience is what makes GB News special.
It's incredible to see.
They shape our programmes, they shape our output, and they shape our channel.
That's what makes us the fearless champion of Britain.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to Alex Armstrong Tonight. I'm Nana Acquia. Breaking in the last few moments, the IDF have identified missiles are being launched from Iran into Israel. An Israeli source has told Reuters Israel will retaliate against Iran. We'll bring you all of the details. Also tonight...
Freaking cannabis farm?
No, gang.
Gang?
Yeah.
To sell drugs?
Drugs, fight, stab, shoot.
We'll be bringing you a shocking TV exclusive. Migrants are brazenly bragging about coming to the UK to sell drugs, fight and stab people.
To the UK? We've got a video of you taking a guy to the UK. You trapping people to the UK? You're walking away. We've got a video of you taking a migrant, promising to take him to the UK.
Zach Garner-Perkis joins us